Welcome to What's Your Reel, a podcast where we interview with industry-leading creatives to learn their story about who they are, how they got there, and where they want to go. We invite you to join us on the journey as we roll their reel to learn how these creatives are finding their way to success.
So today we sat down with Will Peters. Now this is a guy that we've known probably for our entire lives.
It's been a while, yeah. I knew him since I was in middle school, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I knew him since, early, well, heck, I mean, we talk about it a little bit, but we used to do Christmas with their family and all sorts of stuff. But he and I have never really sat down and talked about filmmaking. And holy crap, this guy has done everything. I mean, he has done a lot. This is a long one, but just full of incredible information. Such a cool story. All the things he's done and how he even got to filmmaking. A little bit of our history and I mean, he made a coffee company. I mean, it's just awesome. Super fun to sit down and I think this is a really good reminder that people like this live in Vermont. I mean, we are all just Vermonters who have passions about creative media. And these people exist that you would never even know about. So this one was really cool.
Went to your same high school.
Yeah, went to my high school. I didn't even like, what? I mean, he went to my high school the year I was born, but, anyway, such a fun conversation. You guys are going to dig this one. It's amazing that these people live in Vermont.
Our guest today has done corporate films, narrative, and even a full-length documentary. He both lived and worked through the analog to digital transition in filmmaking, so we'd spend a lot of time talking about that. So with that, welcome Will Peters to the show.
I don't know if you remember this, but
probably
almost.
Not. Probably not.
Okay,
I'm just going to come out to begin with. From 2008-9 before, it's very fuzzy.
Okay, but you basically almost gave me my first editing software. You offered me your second license of Final Cut 7.
Oh, Final Cut 7, yeah.
Remember
So
that?
that must have been a while ago.
Yeah, well, so that's probably
it probably didn't work because I probably had multiple machines or...
It was.
I forget what it was, but...
It didn't work.
No.
Because I think the only CDs you had were your upgrade CDs or something like that.
Yeah.
But I ended up buying it anyway, but
Yeah.
that was where it started. But I remember showing you, because we always did Christmas at your
right.
Christmas
Yeah.
Eve
Yeah.
with you guys.
I remember that.
And see that you remember. That's good.
Well, I do, yes.
I was a little child. I mean,
Yeah.
that was middle school for me.
I remember your brother would be doing some sort of a dancing or juggling or something, some kind of a thing.
Something like that.
And you would be sitting in the corner quietly, just kind of like, not really wanting to participate in any way.
That is the most accurate
right, yeah.
thing you could have said. Yes, and we would alys get robes.
Yeah,
from you
yeah, I
guys.
did remember that. I was like, where did that come from?
I don't
Robes.
know.
It was a strange, like you were in the grotto.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was, but I do remember vividly when I was a little kid in middle school. I had actually two things from you. I think you gave me more information than you may realize.
Oh, wow.
I was like, I really want my first camera to be a 7D. And you're like, no, dude, T3i. Get its little brother. So I did. So the T3i was my first camera.
Definitely a little brother to the 7D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I showed you this little scootering edit that we made on my Handycam, and you're like, "Oh, well, do you want Final Cut 7 or whatever?" And I was like, "Yes," because I was editing.
But that was
on
a big
iMovie.
fail because
It was a big
obviously,
fail. It was a big
obviously
fail.
that didn't work out.
However, we still got it. But yeah, at that point, I remember you had the office in Colchester.
Yeah.
And then you showed me some clip. I think that might have been your documentary at either the beginning
Sounds
of...
about right. And so that office in Colchester, I think, was about 2012.
Yeah.
That
Sounds
I
about
moved
right.
into
Yeah, it would've
there
been 13.
and started kind of the agency work. And at the same time, starting that, we were filming the documentary. It was about a 2.5 year process to get all that footage. So, yeah, around then that was I think summer of 2012.
Yeah.
Around there.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's at that point I was too young to ask the right questions about.
I think it was. Yeah, I think you were probably like, I don't even know.
I would have been 13.
13. Okay, so
2012,
yeah, so that was. But I do remember you showing up, and it was like, I think.
I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Well, and I think I had a room that was just filled with like Pelican cases and just
Yeah.
cables everywhere, and like, you
It
know,
was like Disneyland.
it was like
for a
Disneyland
13-year-old
for
like
13,
me.
into video. And there's not a lot of young people who are that into video in terms of like wanting to know how it is. It's just like they want to go on their iPhone and like, you
Yeah.
know, shoot around and do stuff like that. But yeah, I think from a very early age, you showed
Yeah, I was obsessed.
like
I was obsessed as a little kid.
yeah.
And I'm still a little bit obsessed.
And
It's
I didn't
actually
even
kind of
get into
unbelievable.
it until college. Like it was.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I mean, I was doing, you know, handycam videos with friends and things like that, but didn't really understand anything in terms of how to shoot, how to edit, or anything like that. It was just sort of like having fun in the backyard. and then college came around, and yeah, it was sort of like, okay, yeah, this is lighting, and this is how you do this, and that. So you add on a little bit more of that knowledge as you kind of do it more. But yeah, it was never really until college that I was really interested in it. I was more into writing. Like I liked writing
Oh.
like plays, and I liked writing shorts and things like that. So, and which came in a little bit later as helpful.
Yeah.
You know, when you're it's like, okay, what do I film? It's like, okay, I've got some ideas and things like that. But yeah, it wasn't until later on that I wanted to be behind the camera doing stuff.
Yeah. Interesting. So we talk about what I was doing when I was 12 or 13. What were you doing? What were you
13?
thinking? What were you thinking you like growing up? So you grew up in Vermont.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you want to be when you grow up when you're a little kid?
I loved movies. Movies were, you know, that's kind of where I wanted to live. You know, I remember the movie that I remember just so vividly as like, that blew me away. And I watched it pretty young, was Jaws. And just being like, okay, this is a game changer. This is so crazy. You know, it's, and for the 1970s, I think it came out in 1975. You know, it was like the first big genuine blockbuster movie ever made. So, you know, watching that when I was probably, I don't know, 9 or 10, that was kind of like a big sort of like, oh wow, movies are not just, you know, kid movies. It's like you can have these movies, and obviously at 9 or 10, I didn't understand really what was going on. I just knew, hey, there's a shark going around eating people, and these guys are trying to stop it. Right. But yeah, it's just one of those things that when you're young, you have these moments, especially if you're into filmmaking or movies, you have specific moments in time when you can remember, oh, this is when I knew that, you know, I really liked movies, and then I wanted to be like, I want to do something like that, or I want to write it, or I want to, however I can be involved. You know, that's what I was doing at that point. Just sort of like thinking of stories and just watching movies nonstop. It was sort of where I lived. So,
Well, interesting.
yeah.
So growing up, you never were like the kid playing with cameras.
We had because back then, you know, the cameras that you had were like the VHS big shoulder cameras. So like
Sure.
it's a little easier now for kids to be like getting into this
Right.
stuff because you have it with you all the time. Whereas back then it was like, okay, I'm going to steal my dad's camcorder and we're going to go out in the backyard and film something. And that's basically what we did. I remember we did like, you know, just infomercials. Like I remember back in the mid 90s, infomercials were kind of a thing where it was like this new knife can cut through a shoe and like all this stuff. So we would kind of make parodies of those infomercials. And we made golfing parodies because like back then it was, you know, this new golf club is going to revolutionize your game. And so we did like those parodies where it was like, but it was ridiculous. Like the stuff that this golf club could hit off of, you know, that we were going into the, you know, Monty Python kind of style of things. And that was, you know, that was kind of where we lived as 12-year-old boys.
Nothing wrong with that.
As ridiculous and raunchy as you could be. That was sort of the goal of a backyard VHS camcorder movie.
Sure. But you went, well, so I guess you didn't go to film school. You went to...
I went to a liberal arts college in New Hampshire,
Okay, so...
of which I don't remember much.
so
I remember a little bit.
We can breeze over high school if you want, but if you're in high school,
high
you're like,
school's-
yeah, I know, high school's stupid.
Well, back
I can't say that because I just had my high school teacher on last month, but
Well,
that's all right.
and you apparently had a film teacher there, or someone who taught video.
Our
and stuff like
program
that.
was insane.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did
that's-
not. We had
yeah.
nothing of the sort. It was like usually it was the person who was filming like assemblies. You'd go there with like some horrible camera, and then they'd wheel in that giant TV with a VHS player into like things, and like you were the AV guy. It's like, oh, you got to set up a movie for you for the
right.
and it's on Laserdisc or something like. It was like it was like one of those things, and it was sort of just like, I don't want to do this. Like, I want to wheel a giant TV down the hall and like play a video for everyone. That's not fun.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So that was when I went to high school. That was kind of what the video department was. It wasn't let's go out and make some fun video. It was
Right.
let's show some Nova video to a classroom full of people who don't want to watch it.
Where did you go to high school?
Essex High School.
Seriously?
Yeah.
What year were you in high school?
98 to 2002.
Wait. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I was born in 99.
Jeepers creepers.
98. Okay. Yeah. So
98.
Presco
Yeah.
was not there yet.
No, no, I can't imagine.
No.
There was nothing there video wise.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's insane. It is incredible now.
That's why, I mean, like, obviously times have changed, and
Right.
back when I was getting interested in that, even in college, there wasn't, in terms of equipment, you would have to go to video or film school to participate in any kind of filmmaking activity, because the accessibility wasn't there. There was rental houses that you could spend a fortune getting cameras and film stock and stuff like that. I mean, DV was just kind of, mini DV was starting to be a thing in the early 2000s. Yeah. Even in my first job, we were still shooting on Beta SP. Like, that was kind of like the big, huge Sony Beta cams.
Wow.
And so, I learned on all this equipment. I mean, like, it seems archaic now, but when you are back then with a big shoulder cam and like the lenses were awesome. Like, those lenses on Beta cams were phenomenal. And the quality was actually really quite good. It was just kind of a format that sort of, didn't really work with the kind of prosumer, crossover.
Right.
It was sort of, it was the industry standard for TV and broadcast and things like that. But you couldn't really like, hey, I'm going to go buy an $80,000, Beta cam.
Right.
It was
Exactly.
like, that was how much they cost, and it was
that's crazy.
insane. So that was kind of the first big camera that I remember working on was a Sony Betacam, and you just really couldn't get access to equipment. So people would go to film school and just so they can get their hands on a 16 millimeter camera or a 35 millimeter camera if they were lucky. But usually it was like 8 millimeter, and we're just gonna kind of make little short films, and that was and study kind of how you set up shots and lighting and things like that. But now it's like, forget it. Like, you could do it just on your phone. The amount of technology that's just sitting in that phone is just like wild. If I was a kid with that, it's just like, I mean, my 7-year-old kid is, both my 7 and 5-year-old sons are like, they're reenacting scenes from movies that they see on their iPad, and it's just like, oh man, guys. Have it so easy with this kind of technology stuff. I would have
Back in my day.
killed for that. I feel like that guy. He was like, it's just, feel like that old guy.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the way it happened back then and I would encourage people now to stay away from film school as they could get. It's such a waste of money.
So
That's my personal opinion.
So we will talk about that.
Okay.
You go to, do you remember where you went to college?
Yeah, it was in New Hampshire, I think. No, it was Colby Sawyer.
Okay.
So it was just a small liberal arts college, and I was choosing to go. Ithaca was the other one that I was going to go to, but I was kind of looking at the ability for me to participate in some of the things. Like, I really wanted to be involved with the radio station and things like that. And Colby Sawyer just had a smaller communications program, so the likelihood of me participating in those programs were a lot better in a smaller school versus Not to say that Ithaca's huge, but it's bigger, and their program is a little bit bigger, and they've got more people there. So, I decided to do that so I could, have a chance to be involved in the radio station, and kind of radio was sort of the thing that I wanted to get into when I was in college. Just because I thought it was a cool thing. I loved music. That was kind of one of those things in high school that, I was really, one of the first loves for me was music. And to participate in a radio program more than just having my own show, but I wanted to be the person in charge of like the music director or the station manager or something like that. I wanted to do that, and I was able to do both at Colby Sawyer. So I started out just with my own show, and then I became the music director. So then I would like call all the different distributors and try and get as much of the music that I liked into the radio station, because I'm like, okay, we need to get more of the stuff that I'm into, and that was just sort of like what I wanted to do. And then I became the director of the radio station. When I was a senior. So being able to do that, I thought was more important than getting involved in a bigger program. And then obviously I was taking film courses while I was doing that, and learning to do production. Most of it documentary style. We didn't do too many narrative things. But I was also involved in the theater program. I wrote a bunch of one-act plays that were put on. So like that kind of stuff I was able to do, both in the theater world, and also kind of doing filmmaking stuff. Very bare bones filmmaking. We didn't really do a ton of fun, things that were, it was mainly just like, okay, we're going to interview the, so-and-so from the library. And, it's basically just like to teach you how to set up an interview and how to ask questions and that kind of stuff. So it was more like a news type of a thing, where we'd all be given stories on what to do, and we'd go out and film the stories.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was a different thing. And I didn't get into the narrative stuff until much later. Well, a couple of years later.
Radio surprised me a little bit.
Yeah. I was into radio. I was the Fraser Crane of my college.
Well, this is right up your alley.
Yes.
Or at least it should be.
I know. So I basically had a 3-hour radio show, once a week, and I would do such weird things on my radio show. Like I'd have people call in, and I'd write these sketches, and I'd have people call in as like callers. And then we'd perform this sketch kind of over the phone and into radio, and I still have them somewhere. And I'd have I had my cousin call in once to tell me that he got really drunk and he had gotten married, and he wanted to he didn't know who else to talk to, and so we had this big long thing. It's like I was trying to talk him through the process of like what to do now, and it was it was just kind of goofy stuff like that.
So you're writing comedy.
Yeah, I wanted to do stuff that was funny, and and then that kind of turned into, I met a good friend of mine to this day, Asher Ellis, and he and I kind of bonded over our mutual love of sketch comedy. So we ended up being like, okay, let's go write some sketches and film them, because we had a little handy cam, and that was kind of how you did it back then, is just a little tiny mini DV camera. So we ended up writing all these sketches, and we made 5 or 6 of them, and this was kind of like right at the beginning of we had a YouTube channel. Yep. And that was sort of where I was like, okay, I can put these two things, we can both write these sketches, and then we can film them, and then I edited them together. And that's when I first got Final Cut, was junior or senior year. I got a pirated copy of Final Cut 3.
Heck yeah, dude.
Final Cut 3.
Done.
Yep. That was, and because back then it was like, I don't know how much it was, $650.
Well, it was $1,200 when I bought it. So
yeah, this was so I think someone had given me this pirated copy of it, and so I installed it on my computer and then just taught myself how to use it. Editing these sketches that we had shot together. Nice. So, yeah. And so Asher, my good college friend, we went on to actually co-write some other stuff that we ended up making into short films that were proper narrative shorts, at least better produced short films that would come a little bit later.
Yeah.
So,
So, well, see, I want to jump ahead to like the Hammer and Saw days because that's what I know of your narrative stuff.
Yeah,
But before we get there,
sure.
I think you've already answered this a little bit, saying there's a camera on your phone. My 5-year-old's making movies.
Yeah.
But your thoughts on film school? So that was technically communications, right?
It was communication. It was a much broader program that,
Gotcha.
that incorporated, a lot of different things. It wasn't like there was a portion of it that I focused in that was video production, but it was a much broader program than that. It encompassed the radio station. It did, the newspaper, which I had a running column in.
You did a lot in college.
I did a lot in college. Courses, like I couldn't care less about it. Like everything was about like, okay, I'm going to write. I ended up doing work for the newspaper, and then I'm like, I don't want to write a news story. Like I just want to just write something that I find entertaining. And so that's what I did. I ended up kind of writing this absurd column that I convinced the editor to run, and it was about me being the coolest person at Colby Sawyer. And the whole thing was about like why it was just by far the coolest person there. And it was just this thing where I was talking about and everyone after that thought I was being serious. And
Nice.
so I kind of wrote this column that ended up, I don't know, it ran for a couple years. But every newspaper article, it would just be me being a complete arrogant person, and ended up finding people started understanding that I wasn't really this character, but it was
Right.
I did write, and I had it was not my name. It was, I forget the name that my handle, but so people started catching on that. Oh, he's not serious. So but I forget what we were talking about. Film school. So film school to me is, if you have, I don't know, it just seems to me like it's a huge waste of money. Like it's for the amount that you could learn. So my feeling about it is similar to, I think Quentin Tarantino said something similar to this, where he just said, you don't need to go to film school to make a movie. Just go out and try to make a movie, and you'll learn pretty much everything not to do. Because it's going to be the worst movie ever, but you will probably learn way more in that giant failure than 4 years or however many years of film school. Like you're gonna learn more by trying and failing versus just paying someone a ton of money to show you movies and this is how you set up this shot. It's like you start to realize if you watch enough movies and you do it often enough, where your key lights are, the 180 rule, like there's everything kind of just, there are only a few things you really need to pay attention to in a lot of that. I mean, obviously that's an exaggeration. There are more than a few things, but in terms of like the setup of a shot and things like that, there are filmmakers who have zero experience making movies. And as long as you get simple things like sound recorded properly and things like that, there are a few things that you need to make sure you do well. Like I would much rather watch a movie that was filmed on a really horrible camera, but you can hear what they're saying, versus something that looks amazing, but everything's echoey and like, what is he saying? I don't understand. Is she, what is her relationship to him? Like what, like all that stuff is, captured in audio and things like that. So, those things are learned pretty much the first thing when you try to make a movie. It's like, oh man, does this sound horrible? Yeah, well, maybe we should get a proper sound person. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I don't need to pay $250,000 for that lesson. I just, honestly, it's like, and if you objectively watch your movie that you made and say, gosh, that looks horrible. That shot could have been better. That we could have framed that better. This sounds horrible. We could have used that. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can just sort of pick apart in your movies, or your films that you will basically, it's the same thing you're paying for in film school.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I'm not not to say that it's some people it's good. I would to me it seems like a waste.
Well, all the basics are free now.
Yeah.
You can find it anywhere.
Literally, go on YouTube. You could literally learn pretty much everything on watching a couple YouTube videos on tips and techniques on lighting. Like everything is just there at your fingertips now. So to pay someone a ton of money to basically show you the same thing in person, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't go to film school, right?
No, I spent my money on lights and cameras.
Yeah. I mean,
That's literally what I did with my college fund.
I mean, honestly,
I put it on gear.
That's yeah. And then you know, obviously you mess around with it and you shoot a bunch of stuff, and then lo and behold, it slowly starts to get better and better and better. But before you know it, it's, you know, a proper film or video or whatever it is.
Right.
And that's, you know, for narrative films, it's a completely different story than obviously the documentary side or doing corporate videos, you know, doing narrative stuff versus corporate stuff, which I did for years. You know, it was, you know, doing videos and productions that are selling stuff or trying to recruit people, or, you know, there's, you know, those kind of videos are a completely different animal than narrative, where you have a script and you've got, you know, blocking and you've got all kinds of different things. That's more of like a theater performance than it is you know, anything else. So
that's very interesting. Your background in the radio thing, your background in the theater thing. I mean, were you writing at all? So how long have you been had a passion for writing? Did that start high school, or did that start?
Yeah, I mean, since I remember, let's see, the thing that I remember getting really into at a young age was reading a book by Woody Allen called Without Feathers.
Okay.
And it was a bunch of his essays from the time that he worked or wrote for The New Yorker and a bunch of these other things, but just a very funny, hysterical writer. And, you know, his films he's just prolific in terms of the amount that he does. But you know, scandals aside, he was one of the early writers, directors that I paid attention to. You know, Annie Hall. Remember watching Annie Hall for the first time and just being like, wow, for a film made in 1977, it was way beyond, I think, what anyone had seen up until that point come out of film, or you know, to break, you know, fourth wall and do kind of all these different things that I don't know if people had seen before, incorporating animation into live action. You know, there's a lot of interesting things like that. So I would say that was probably one of the first times that I was like, I think I'm pretty funny, or I think I could write something that's entertaining. You know, obviously at that point it's like, it doesn't quite work that way, but you're like, it inspires you and you're like, okay, I like doing this. And so that's kind of what, anything that could get me involved with writing, if it was for the stage or for radio or for, you know, on screen, you know, those are the things that I wanted to do. So
I feel like you're a giant movie geek. Meaning, I feel like, are you the guy who knows the director of all these movies?
A lot of them, not a ton. I honestly
Yes, the answer is yes.
Modern movies, and again, going back to the fact that you know, it's sort of like the last 7 years are sort of like, I don't really remember a ton.
Is that because of children?
Yeah, and like I haven't been to the movie theater. You know, it was sort of like new movies. I'm just like, oh, this is a new movie. It's like, oh no, that was released in like 2014. I'm like, oh yeah, okay.
What, really? I feel like you'd be the type of person to watch every movie that comes out.
I try to, but it's not until it gets released down the road. So
Right,
I'm
free.
watching. Yeah, so I'm watching
on Netflix,
which
you'll
on
see it
Netflix or wherever. But most of the time, I'm watching movies, older movies that I feel bad that I've never seen. You know, like those kind of things. Like I watched, forget what I saw the other night. That I don't know, some movie from the 60s. I forget what it is. See, it's like my brain is mush now. But I'm more of a you know, 70s American film fan. Just because I think the movies that were made in the 70s they couldn't be made now, and they're just narrative wise and the structure. I mean, I don't think people now easily sit through. If that makes any sense. Like I think like the stories that they were telling in the 70s and the way that they were showed the grittiness, and there's a lot of things that are just of that era that are just, people would be like, what? Why is it? What's going on there? Like, it's a, the violence. There's Sam Peckinpah movies that are just like, they're just very, very violent. And, Straw Dogs is one that I remember watching and being like, oh my gosh, that's an earlier Dustin Hoffman movie. I think just the aesthetic and the way filmmakers made movies just without really caring much about the audience. What's the audience going to think of this? It's just like, that's what the movie is. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. If you like it, you like it. Taxi Driver, again, it's one of those movies that you watch and you're just like that. I mean, that's a movie you probably couldn't make today. But it's a movie that no one had seen up until that point in cinema.
Right.
Just the grittiness and the subject matter is, I don't know if it's something that, you could make now without being that weird director and not Martin Scorsese,
Right. Yeah. Do you, okay, well, that actually, I was going to ask what kind of movies do you gravitate towards now, but you just told me that.
Well, there are others like Toy Story and,
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Interesting. How you doing over there?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been quiet. You've been very
You're
quiet.
just listening.
I tend to be more of a listener.
I'm noticing that.
Yeah. I like to wait for a good pause, and you don't give me a good pause.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Would you like me to give you a pause?
No, it's all right, because I was gonna go back to right after college. You said you were shooting documentaries. Was that for fun or paid gigs or?
So in 2005, I got a job at a just a marketing agency, and as I started as an intern, and then they ended up hiring me, and I ended up being kind of in charge of the video side of things. They had a video guy there that was doing all the production. He ended up moving, and I was the only person there, and so it was, I got promoted in a sense to this guy's job, and I ended up basically being in charge of all the video production for this agency, and so I was doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was a lot of it was healthcare recruitment videos, for hospitals who are, hiring nurses and all kinds of different things like that. But it was, and then we did videos for sporting things, Air Force. There's a lot of things like that. Spent some time in LA doing work like on sets and things like that. So it gave me a good kind of cross section of what you could do in terms of making this a profitable skill, and then because that's kind of one of the things, like you got all this gear, you spent tons of money on gear. It's like, okay, how do I make money doing it? And so that kind of taught me a lot about, okay, this is sort of like what the corporate side of video production and editing is. So that's a kind of a completely different thing than doing the passion project narratives and documentaries and things like that. But I got an idea of, it obviously came and helped out a lot when I ended up doing a feature length documentary, setting up interviews. I mean, like I've done this for, 5 or 6 years at this point. So I can basically do this in my sleep now and know how to, light a room and a subject and, set up a 2-camera shot. And that's, what ended up happening. And I was able to do it in a feature length format.
How are you?
Go ahead.
How are you feeling at that point in your career, shooting videos for hospitals or golf or whatever?
I mean, I liked it. It was obviously I was working in the industry that I wanted to, and that I wanted to learn more about. And so it was just sort of, it wasn't really about the subject matter per se. I think it was just, a lot of it was like, okay, the challenge of how to, it forced me to, okay, let me watch other people's work and see what they're doing. And, cause most of the industry is people copying each other, and like, in terms of, editing styles and, and back then we were nonlinear editing was fairly new. Back when I was in college, we were literally editing on the it was the Casablanca Avio. So it was, you'd load in your tape and digitize it, and then you'd have like a little rolly ball that you were dragging clips sort of near each other, but there were boxes, and you could do a crossfade and type text, and it's there you had it. That was that was in your toolbox right there. There was not, if you wanted in-camera effects, they better be in camera because they're not coming from the editing software.
You can't fix it in post.
No, there was not a lot of fixing in post. It was, that's a bad shot. Well, or anything like that. So moving on to this, where you could basically, I could shoot something in, do a 3 or 4 day shoot and then turn it around in like 2 days and just be like, I was kind of in that, I was very much mechanized. I was sort of like, okay, I could turn this around in 2 days. I've got 4 hours of footage, make a 4-minute video out of it, and then turn it around, for edits. And that was sort of what I did from 2005 to 2012 was just kind of work in that world. And then in that time, in my spare time, I should say, I was kind of doing narrative type things and trying to do more of the films that I wanted to do.
What kind of clients have you worked for? Like notables?
Notables?
That wasn't supposed to be an insult.
No. I mean, like a lot of it was, for the first, it was like Dartmouth Hitchcock, Fletcher Allen. Like
Gotcha,
there was a lot of hospitals there. There was hospitals out in Binghamton, New York, and South Florida, and out west. And I did work for oil companies out in Wyoming. Did a lot of work for the Air Force out in LA.
So you were doing traveling and you were doing all sorts of stuff.
There was some points in my, and obviously when you're unmarried, you can do things like that. Where it was, I would go for a week. From Monday to Sunday, and then I would unpack. I would get back on Sunday night, and then I'd have a flight the next morning to go somewhere else. And I was kind of working on that schedule for a very long time. And then I'd probably shoot for 3 weeks, and then I'd come back and edit for another 2 weeks. Like that was kind of my schedule. And then they'd get a new client in, New Mexico, and then I'd be off there to shoot. Sometimes we'd hire teams out there to help if it was a bigger shoot. Sometimes we'd bring our own folks, kind of depended on. And then there's sometimes where we had 2 shoots at once, and we'd have a team go to this place, and I would go to this place, and we were just kind of managing a lot of those shoots, which was fun. Like when you're in your early 20s and you're traveling a bunch, and it's you're kind of seeing parts of the country you've never seen, and
yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's great, and you're in the process and a lot of times I would my good friend Stefan, who worked there as a project manager, he and I became close friends because we'd be traveling together pretty much nonstop. We'd get into a car, we'd drive to some place to shoot for 4 days, and after shoots you're just hanging out with each other, and that's kind of like when you do that for years, it's like you just are, you kind of have this shared experience where it's like, you're sort of in a weird
forced friends, almost.
Weird brotherhood, it's like, we
Yeah.
just go do these sometimes they were normal. Sometimes they were a little bit weird, in terms of like, not the subject, not that we were filming weird stuff. Let me not,
I hear
not
that.
that impression. But it was like things that were just, we were doing videos for mining and like, just, okay, now I'm going into a hospital. I'm scrubbing up to film a surgery. And then next week I'm going to be, half a mile underground in a cave.
Slap on a hard hat.
Yeah. It's like,
That's so cool.
And so it's like those kind of things were just, from one week to the next, it was weird,
Yeah. But that's what I love about filmmaking.
Yeah, that's kind of fun.
It just takes you all over the place.
Yeah. Especially the corporate side, because it's like, you're not, and most agencies are hired. They don't really care what it is. It's like, yeah, you need a video about, mastectomy bra? Sure. Yeah. Let's, we can do that. Yeah. I don't no problem.
So the whole time you're working in hospitals, you're just writing that short film that you made.
Oh yeah. And then, and a lot of and there was, and
was that
obviously,
called?
What's that?
The short film in the hospital.
Oh yeah, I did one.
Is it Checkup?
The Checkup. Yeah, I did one. I did one called the Checkup. That was sort of based on a lot of the, that kind
So
of.
that was just
stuff.
throwing it back to your
I mean,
your experiences.
I'd say 70% of the shoots that I was doing were in hospitals, and
Wow.
it was in OR suites, and filming like hip replacements and like.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's like and
I don't
there's
even know if I could do that.
it's weird at first, for sure. There's definite instances where I had to like sit down and kind of be like, okay, let me take some deep breaths. It's like when they start like cauterizing and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna faint, I'm gonna pass out. Is there? I don't want to fall into the into the
person.
into the hole. So it's like there'd be times where I'm just like, okay. I need a chair, like anyone, and I'd be like, oh, I just need to get a low angle of the, and I'm like, meanwhile, I'm just kind of like, I'm pasty, cold sweat. But that only happened like that was once, and that was it wasn't even that bad of a surgery. It was literally, I think they cauterized something, and the fumes made me lightheaded.
Still gets to you.
Yeah, and so. And then like you just never know. And then a lot of times, you're forced to if the Best Western didn't have 2 rooms, it's like, oh, you're bunking with whoever you're there on the shoot with. It's
Sure.
like it's that kind of lifestyle, and it gets. There's a certain time it's like I want to be home and just kind of like sleep in my own bed. But yeah, I think it's it kind of teaches you. It's like we do live in Vermont, right? There's not a lot in terms of like industry and like filmmaking opportunities. So everything that you're going to be doing production wise is going to be out of state. I mean, I had a couple like college accounts that I managed in the state, Vermont, New Hampshire, but pretty much everything else, it's like you're going out of the Northeast. So you got to be sort of okay with being able to travel if you want to be in this industry and be a working person in production or whatever you're doing.
So you're working for a Vermont agency?
Yeah, it was a Vermont agency.
Oh, okay. So you came back right after college?
Yeah, so I interned during college, and then they hired me out of college.
Right.
And it was kind of, the first week we were doing shoots. So it was sort of, nonsense. There wasn't too many months where I was not shooting.
Yeah.
So again, like being organized with all your gear and like knowing where things go and being able to quickly get to something on a set or a shoot, hugely important, so that you're not sitting there going like, I think we put back then it was tapes. It's like we had boxes of tapes. So it was like DV tapes, and then you're taking them, and then you got to put them in a special place, because if you're going on a flight, you don't want them to go through magnetized. That's like, and then you lose however many days of footage. There's a lot of risk. It wasn't like digital files. You could be like, I'm going to put it on this drive and this drive and this drive, and I have like backups of everything. Back then, it's like we have a physical tape. If we lose the tape, job's done. Like there's nothing. We got to reschedule a shoot and do it over. You've got one copy, and that's where.
Wow.
Back then, it was like for the longest time, I was wanting to get. They made basically little, I guess they're just little hard drives that you could basically digitize onto while you were shooting in the tape. You have like your physical tape, and then you've got a 500 gig hard drive that you're recording to also. So there was a point in time, a couple years in, where we got one of those, and I was like, oh, because every single time it created so much anxiety in terms of when you're traveling with tapes and everything you've just shot over a week, and sometimes 2. Like we'd be shooting for, a while. I was in LA for, I think 6 or 7 weeks shooting.
Wow.
And so you just have, gigabytes and gigabytes of stuff, and you're just going through it. It definitely sets you up for, if you ever want to do a feature-length documentary or a feature-length film at all, is organizing your footage and kind of knowing what to do afterwards. If it's put it on a couple drives, have enough cards, everything. That stuff really prepares you for doing that when you're actually kind of doing your own thing. So yeah, it's I don't know how we got back onto that.
Well, no, I get anxiety with 3 backups on hard drives when I travel. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine that, dude.
Yeah, no, it was horrible, and it wasn't until I think few years in where you could get a drive that was able to digitize in real time while you were shooting.
Wow.
So, and then you'd have to unload. There was the process of plugging that in and unloading all the footage onto that and making sure that was all good. And
Filmmaking sounds like it was really hard.
you have no idea, do
I mean,
you?
it's
You really don't.
I really don't.
No.
I mean, I live.
This is like the greatest time to be involved in this too, because there is just the accessibility is just unbelievable.
It's funny because they were probably saying that back then.
But you're still having to pay so much money for,
Right.
I mean, cameras back then,
yeah,
even
yeah.
for like, you know, a mini DV camera with a couple XLR jacks so you can record audio was a lot of money. And now you can get like basically that same thing for a fraction of the price, and you
Yeah.
can get into it, I mean, fairly inexpensively, and have a pretty decent setup.
for sure.
You know, I mean, like the lights now are LED. Like you could change color temperatures. You don't have to change. I mean, like white balancing is sort of like, I guess, if you know, you can do it, but you can like warm things up with just like a light and those kind of things. Obviously, always have to white balance. Take your readings, people. I'm not saying let the lights do it for you. But yeah, so that that it was cool to kind of come up in that cross from analog to digital. I mean, pretty much in that 15 years was sort of like it went from, an $80,000 Beta SP camera to like you could pretty much get into this and shoot amazing stuff with a $500 Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. Like it's
right.
And shoot incredible footage from that has 14 stops at dynamic range.
You
and
had
like,
one of those, didn't you?
Oh yeah, that was like we shot a lot of the documentary on that because we had a ton of low light shots that we were doing.
Is that good in low light?
Well, we were using I had a Voigtlander like 0.9 f 0.9 lens.
Oh, holy crap!
So really, really fast.
I didn't know those existed.
They do, and it's a phenomenal lens. But like the fact is that like when you're shooting in like really like darkness and you've got like headlamps as the light source, it's in any other camera the dark, the black colors are just going to be sort of just grainy and gross.
Yeah.
And whereas, when that camera came out, it was sort of like you could get into that look for $2,000.
Wow.
And all the fact is you could just basically, in post-production really crank, your different channels and get a lot more out of the footage. There was just so much more
Interesting.
information there. In like the darkness, you could just even like brighten it up and be like, oh yeah, there's trees in the back that you could see in the, in the footage. And it's just like capturing it when you can't see it.
Wow.
So that was definitely kind of one of those things when you start to get out of those cameras that are basically fixed lenses and you're just shooting with like depth of field was never really like, you didn't really get into that until, the DSLR craze started,
Interesting.
Yeah.
You said working with an agency is kind of the corporate track. Is that a good career, or is that kind of an entry-level job, what you were doing, traveling around, shooting, editing?
I mean, it's if you want to make money, you should know how to shoot all kinds of different things because, people are going to hire you and they're going to want to, they're going to hire you to make a video or something about whatever product or service you're trying to sell. So having the flexibility to be able to do all kinds of different things, I think is a good skill to have, especially when you're trying to make money in this, because you're not gonna be like, I make videos about lawnmowers and that's it. It's like, you're not gonna get that many gigs doing that. It's like, you need to be able to shoot everything and shoot it well and edit it well. And, so to have your skills doing all kinds of stuff is hugely important. But again, it's not an easy industry to be involved in, especially in the Northeast, outside of Boston. Like you can get a lot of, good video jobs out of Boston and stuff. But when you're sort of more up here and, you're kind of away from everything, the tendency is for most people to go with bigger agencies that have, the ability to go and shoot lots of different things. They've got a bigger portfolio than you. So working at that and making an effort to be sure you can, be as broad in terms of your services as possible is huge. I've been hired on sets where I'm literally just doing lighting. Like I'm just like a grip and doing that kind of stuff. The fact that you know how to do that, I mean, you're basically, you're gonna be able to do something in that industry.
One more skill in the
it's just
toolkit.
one more skill you can do. If you could do that, if you can hold a boom mic, if you know kind of where shadows are being casted, that kind of stuff is hugely important.
So when did Hammer and Saw come into the world?
So that came into the world in the, I think 2007, 8, something like that.
Okay.
So a guy I had known from college, Mike Mooney, very talented guy. He was actually also involved in a like a sketch comedy group out of New Hampshire. And so he had seen, I think, some of the stuff my friend Asher and I were doing, and I had seen some of the stuff that he was doing. And so we had just talked casually about, about sketch comedy, filmmaking. They had made a feature length movie of, I was 60-minute feature of this sketch thing where it was like that's a 3-act, thing you're doing here. That's pretty cool. They were doing like 2-3 minute videos. But anyways, our paths had crossed in a lot of that stuff. And then I think it was I had gone back for some kind of a event at the college, and I think we had connected that way, and he had stopped doing stuff with his sketch thing, and I was doing more of the corporate side of stuff, but I was wanting to get back into doing some more kind of narrative type things that either I had written or that I liked versus, doing surgeries. That gets old after a while. So he and I had connected and were like, hey, we should do something. We're both sort of wanting to do creative stuff. So I think the idea was let's try to do a short film. And I had written this short film with a friend of mine, Asher, and it was Motel, which was the first short film that I made. So I sent the script to Mike, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. And it was, again, it's like finding people like that who are just like, yeah. Why? Let's do it. Because you meet a lot of people, especially in this profession, who are very, I don't know. I think this is going to fail. I think this is going to be bad. I think, there's a lot of people who are just like downers, and it's just like, who cares? Like, why? Like, we're going to spend a couple $100 on this to like hire a sound guy and kind of get this thing right, as right as we can get it. But who cares if it's, I'm sure it's probably not going to be that good, but, finding people like that. And he was one of those people who, was like, yeah, let's do it. And you don't find those people very often who are just like, yeah, how about next weekend?
Right.
You have people who are just like, well, I got this, I got that, I got I got a job and I got to pay for this. And it's like, back then when you're in your 20s or you're not paying mortgages and, have kids, it's a lot easier to just be like, yeah, let's go find a location and shoot this thing in 2 days. Which is exactly what we did. So we went out like literally very soon after, and we scouted locations and found a location where the guy was, had allowed us to shoot overnight. We had during the day and then overnight, and we had to be done by the next morning. Cause it was Super Bowl Sunday. So he's like, there's not going to be a lot of people at the motel. So, there's usually like one guy who gets kicked out of his house for being, too loud or drunk, and his wife kicks him out and he stays in the motel. But he's like, other than that, I think it should be pretty good.
Pretty mellow. Yeah.
So we ended up shooting it. We had the cast of 3, and then a sound guy and me. And it was 5 people, including the cast. And obviously, everyone was helping out, doing everything, lugging and tugging gear and stuff. But everything was very simply set up. There was like, we'd have like one light, like everything was very it was a dark sort of goofy movie anyways. So, we kind of wanted to use the space as it was. So we spent we ended up casting another local actor, and I had our friend Ben Watts, join the cast, and so we had 3 cast members and shot it, and it ended up we found it funny, and it got mixed reviews.
Did it really?
I mean, people, I think they just didn't get it. It's not that they didn't get it. It's just, it was not, there wasn't that much.
It's pretty funny.
There was not that much going on in it. It was sort of
Right,
like
yeah.
the repetition of it, I think, was what bothered some people.
I
And
see.
but anyways, it was honestly,
The repetition was the whole point.
well,
kinda.
honestly, like writing it was like, I don't want to have this thing shot in a million locations. Like the worst thing you could do as a person, a young filmmaker or writer, is to write this sprawling
Right.
script that is impossible to film. Like,
Wait, were all the motels one hotel?
of course, yeah, actually,
No
we
way,
did the same
seriously?
exact room. Yeah,
Well, I know that, but like the exteriors and stuff?
I think I might have gone out and shot some exteriors.
Okay, because I was like,
but
there's no way you made them all look different.
the inside was like
Right.
they were going into 3 different. Anyways, it was.
Well, that's why it's freaking hilarious.
Well, and honestly, it was just for us, it was sort of like the lab rat film that we wanted to make, to be like, I knew Mike could act. We got people who were capable to be on screen and ended up being great. It was mainly just like, okay, can I, cut the script up and block it and kind of film it as you should and have it be successful, and can we do it in 6 hours? It was like,
so you
that
did
was
it.
the big thing. It's like,
Wow.
I got a 14-page script. We gotta pretty much just plow through this thing, and but again, planning the day was like, we got to shoot. We have so much daylight, and then we got to shoot the nighttime shot, and so obviously we had to make sure that all that stuff was planned and scheduled, so that we weren't going to be sitting there the next morning being like, we have to come back tomorrow night and do pickup shots or things like that. We needed to make sure that we captured everything and did it in one location. Like that was the whole thing.
Yeah, so that was basically the first short film.
That was the first short film we made.
Wow.
And the other cool thing is that we were able to take it around to film festivals. It won a bunch of Best of Film Festival awards, and it was kind of one of those things where when you are done with the film and you show it to people, just getting the feedback from other people, not just audience members, but other people who are in the industry, is very important, because obviously it's not fun to hear that I didn't like this part, or this could have worked better, or
Right.
But to have people tell that to you as like this criticisms of your film, to be like, okay, next time do this. Like I remember the sound guy that I hired talked to me about mastering the audio, because with the first couple of film festivals I had mixed it kind of how I
see.
thought
Yeah.
it sounded okay in my speakers, but it was a little too hot on one channel, and so in a theater environment it translates differently. So
Right.
there were some lines I couldn't hear because they were more to one channel, and so he was like, send it to me and I'll remix it. But like, one of the things you got to really be mindful of is like, when you're finished and you've locked the edit, the audio someone needs to come in and sweeten the audio and kind of make it work in a theater setting, because it's going to be different coming out of your computer or laptop than it is coming through a huge sound system.
Right.
So that was kind of one of those things you're like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Again, I didn't need to go to film school to learn that. I just need to make a film and have some areas of it be lacking, and someone tell me, and okay, great. That's going in the, post-production budget for next
Lesson
time.
learned.
Yeah.
So what I love about Motel, though, is it's a very doable story. So like
Like, one character played 3 people. And yeah, so it's like you can create different worlds with a very simple setting, and
Well,
that's
that's-
kind of the whole idea.
Well, I just think that's where a lot of people get stuck, is where like a lot of people will write these incredible stories, but I mean, you can't shoot the Avengers, right?
Right.
So it's, and a lot of people get stuck of where it's like, oh, well, I'll make this when I can. instead of just writing something that you can make now.
Yeah, it's like, if I can only get $250,000, I can make my movie. It's
Right.
like, yeah,
Well,
I
so
think it's gonna happen.
So obviously this is still, I mean, small budget for filmmaking, but it's kind of big budget. It's like, have you seen Get Out?
Oh yeah,
I mean, that was like it must have been so easy to one location, like, you know, it's a house and an apartment or whatever.
well, I mean, like, there's a lot of movies that kind of utilize that. I mean, like, there's a movie called Cube. I don't know if you've ever seen Cube, but it's
think so.
a horror movie where these people are in a cube and they don't know how to get out or what to do, and so there's again.
Yeah, but it's just like I love Get Out for a lot of reasons, but
Yeah.
one, it was just like it looked very achievable to make.
Yeah.
Super low budget. They
Oh,
only
yeah.
spent like a couple $100,000 on it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, think about it. I mean, they had cast and crew, and you know, they probably rented a house or whatever on a lake, and
Yeah.
and it made a whole heck of a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I think it was the best movie of that year, whatever year that was. But because I'm kind of sick of like the superhero movies because it's just like they're always going to go make money. So it's like, why do you like another Batman? Guys, another one? Like the trailer came out yesterday.
Remake.
Another Batman?
But isn't Michael Keaton supposed to be in that one?
Oh, I don't know.
I think I heard something about that, so I'm like, okay, maybe I get by that.
But it's just like,
I don't know.
mean,
I haven't kept up with the Marvel universe. There's like 900 movies, and it's like I have a good friend of
Batman's
mine,
DC, but
or like or the Avengers one.
yeah, I
guess was
never
like-
I never watched really. I mean, I watched Thor Ragnarok for the first time recently.
Yeah.
It was actually freaking
I've
hilarious.
heard there's some
But-
great movies in that in those, and some not so great, but
Yeah, but they're very
I don't
much
know.
like they're just
yeah,
Again
people
and again.
People
No,
were
yeah, it is what it is.
crying at the end of the last Avengers movie, so
That's true.
it was like that was a big deal. People were getting emotional.
That's true.
So it was like it's the Schindler's List of the 2018, 2019.
20, I don't know.
But
Whatever it
yeah,
was.
those movies don't really. I don't resonate to those movies as much. I can appreciate them for what they are, and you know, if I was maybe younger, I guess I'd probably be totally into them. And they just
Right.
do it for me. I mean,
Well,
But-
yeah, I mean, they're superhero movies. What else can you say, you know?
they're basically animated movies. I mean, like they're not
True.
movies in a sense that they.
I mean,
like,
okay.
There's very little on location shooting. It's all blue and green screen.
Filmmaking wise, they are incredible.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong. But
They're animated movies a lot of
But,
times.
yeah.
Like, there's not a lot of. I mean,
yeah, like the for lack of a better word, the incredibleness of some of those movies is incredible.
yeah.
But it's like, I don't know. They're just, I'm not a big superhero movie guy.
Yeah,
but-
I'm moving in the opposite direction in terms of all that, like
Hmm.
in terms of special effects and things like that. I sort of going into. I mean, I like super raw indie movies
Yeah.
a little bit more
Hmm.
because I look at it as a filmmaker and not so much as like a audience members. I mean, I do, but I definitely think of it more as like, oh, how did they make that, or like where do they?
Right.
That seems like
Yeah.
a good choice as for a director in terms of like keeping the budget down. Like I
Sure.
definitely think in
That-
that
yeah,
mindset.
I can relate.
a lot. But yeah,
You look antsy over there.
Antsy? No.
You look antsy. You have your pen in your hand. That typically means that you have
Oh,
something to
he's
say.
making notes.
That just means I'm always fiddling. No, I'm just listening, thinking of next questions, and like I haven't watched some of these movies. Like I
really?
could care less about.
Dude, you gotta watch
Avengers
Get Out.
or whatever.
You gotta watch Get Out.
yeah, Get Out's good.
Great movie.
I'll write that down.
Make a note. Make a note of that.
Use your pen, bro.
Watch Get Out.
Yeah. So what was Hammer and Saw? Was that you just like
We just
made a name?
Yeah, it was sort of like, we had a film under our belts. Okay, we got to have like a production company that's behind this thing, and it was
Gotcha.
2 people.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, we ended up following up that with a horror movie that I wrote with that was based off of my friend Asher's short story.
Which one was that?
Exit 7A.
Oh yeah,
was,
dude, that one was sick.
So that one was his short.
The trailer
story.
for that was amazing.
Oh yeah. I
Oh,
can't
yeah.
remember the trailer.
I loved the trailer.
Oh, really?
It was just so like, I was like, who thinks of that? It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Asher gave me the short story that he wrote and I read it. I'm like, oh, this would be an awesome short film. Because for the same exact reason, like it's in a car. Like the whole thing is like this guy picks up a hitchhiker and it's filmed in a car. So
Right.
like 90% of the movie takes place like inside of a car. I'm like, first of all, great for budget. Like we don't really
Right,
need much of
yeah.
a set. We're pretty much lighting wise, we're going to do it in the day and we can natural light is fine. But also it's like, can we make that interesting? Can we make the dialogue be able to be sustained in a car
Right. It
between
was
two
very
people?
heavy dialogue.
Yeah, so that was kind of another thing. It's like so he and I sat down and we wrote we adapted it and changed a lot of it from the short story. Different ending. Like there was things that we worked on and we got it to the point where we were like, all right, I think this is pretty cool and it's a departure. It's not a comedy. It's a different genre. So it was sort of like, and I love the horror genre. Growing up, I was definitely really some of my favorite movies are horror movies. So to kind of try one was kind of what I was looking at. And I think that was 2009, 10, something like that.
Yeah.
That we made that, and so I had to kind of figure out how do we rig up a car to film, mounting cameras and things like that. So there was all
that must
that
have been
kind
fun.
of there was that was the tech side of getting a suction cup mounting kit and mounting the DSLR on there and trying to record audio inside the car. We had a sound guy who was in the way back and I was I was hiding beneath the seat. So I was in there watching all the takes on a monitor, so I'd be like, okay.
that's
And then
great.
we just ride this same road, like
Wow.
back and forth, like the one long road that we shot the film on. We just kind of went up and down this thing and, they do the scene
Yeah.
and there's, four of us, two in the front seat and I was in the back seat, just hunched underneath,
out of the way,
underneath the
right?
blanket.
Right.
Yeah. And just like watching a little tiny monitor.
That's
And
awesome.
I'd say, okay, cut. No, we got to go back and do it. And I'm just a voice from under the seat, like talking to everyone. And so, and then we finished up the rest of the movie in different, a couple different locations.
Did that make a festival run?
It did, yeah. And, it did pretty well. I think it was, evident that there was a lot of stuff we learned in the first one, that we were able to really kind of get right in this. And it did really well in the festival circuit. And, we were able to go to different film festivals because it was a genre movie and it was more horror. We went to a lot of horror film festivals. And so kind of getting in with that crowd is a completely different breed of film fans.
Right.
Horror film fans are kind of like if you go to like a comic book convention, it's like sort of like they're just live and breathe horror movies.
Interesting.
And so you get a lot of feedback from horror fans about your movie because it's like if they live and breathe this stuff, they want to talk all about this. And, and then you go to these film festivals and a lot of times you do see those movies that they wrote it and it was a big idea, like in their minds. And it just was too big for like a low budget movie to be doable. And you're like watching a lot of these things being like, that's why we shot it in one location. That's why we did, because it's just, you could tell when a movie is low budget, when the ideas are moving faster than they can film them.
Are you like trying to, what's in your head making these short films? Is this just for fun still? Or are you like, I want to make movies?
I think both. I mean,
Yeah,
like if
okay.
it would be tough if you're not having fun with it. Because I can't imagine it lasting too long if you're not enjoying the process of making it. And it's just also the challenge of taking a script or something like that and kind of visualizing it. Because like when I'm reading it, like I'm going, okay, these are the shots that I'm seeing right now and storyboarding it and kind of understanding, what it could be and the visuals and the aesthetic and things like that. And then you're like, okay, this is the kind of score I'm thinking of because you're starting to put this movie together in your head. And I think when you're doing that, it starts to become really a lot of fun because then you're just like, you know exactly what you're doing and you're just excited to like, okay, I know the setup I want. And it's just about going out and executing it and kind of when you get it, you're like, oh, that's going to be great.
Yeah.
I had a scene in that when we were doing when you were writing it, I'm like, okay, I know exactly how this scene's going to play out. And it was this kind of a single take Steadicam shot from the car to the front door and turning around. And there was it was a longer shot for what I'm used to, and doing the whole thing on a Steadicam, like not a movie. Back then it was you put the whole thing on and you had the giant double arm spring and you're weighting it, and you're walking around with a really, really heavy camera rig on.
Oh yeah.
And but when you're reading it, you're kind of like figuring all that stuff out. And I think what I really enjoyed of the process was storyboarding it and kind of getting it in my head, but then going out and shooting it.
So I have a confession to make. I copied Exit 7A in high school.
Did you?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
It was awesome. It was so much fun. And it was actually pretty funny because it was one of those things where we shot it and then I was like, holy crap, this is Exit 7A. I just nonchalantly wrote the whole thing.
I think I did. You either sent it to me or this was years ago, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I was probably a junior.
Okay.
So 5 years.
I do remember seeing a lot of the stuff, and I remember watching it and definitely being like, oh, this is
Exit 7A.
No, I didn't. Not that it was Exit 7A, but like, okay, this is it's got a cool feel to it, and it's the aesthetic.
Yeah. Well, I just love the idea, and I don't want to I kind of don't want to spoil what's happening in it. If anybody listens to this and wants to go watch it,
yeah.
But I just loved the concept of
it was
just having that person next to you. It was just it's so good.
Yeah, it was definitely one, and obviously the Asher's original idea. Was one that I read it and being like, oh, that's so cool. Like it's such a great,
it's
idea.
A great idea.
And I still read a lot of, so my friend Asher is an author, a horror author. So he writes, not, full novels, purely horror genre. But like just the ideas, I think when you're thinking in that kind of mindset and, you're reading a lot of horror, you kind of can go in such different directions than you normally would if you're, writing some other genre.
A blast.
Well, right, exactly, because there's so
you
much.
You can do whatever messed up
you have
crap
so much
is in your head.
latitude to move in. It's like anything could happen. It's a horror movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Lovecraft. It's like, let's add new dimensions. Okay, yeah, well, it's a horror movie. Sure, we do whatever
Get
you
Out.
want.
It's like they switch their brains.
Yeah.
And like when you're watching the movie, you're like, that makes sense. And then the movie ends, you're like, wait, that would never work.
Well, he's got a really cool. I mean, a unique voice in horror right now. Like just a lot of his movies.
Jordan Peele.
Yeah. So like just the movies that you're seeing, and a lot of the stuff that you're seeing out of like A24. Very much that they're bringing back a lot of the mood of horror and not so much like the slasher blood and gore stuff.
Right.
But there's a lot of A24 is one of these companies that's making a lot of very subtle horror movies, like psychological horror movies, and movies that I think probably would be more apt for the 70s, like Midsommar, like those kind of 2.5 hour long horror movies are just like, first of all, horror for a while is supposed to be, 80 minutes and, you're walking out after just finishing your popcorn and it's like, the knife wielding maniac is dead. Now it's like you've got 2.5 hours and they're setting up this incredible mood, and it's much more of the tempos are changing a lot in the horror genre, I think, to be a little bit more of a novel kind of style.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
You're making me want to make a short film so bad, dude. I miss those days.
Those
are my high school days where
sure.
it was like we would just sit in class and write something and then go make the thing. It was a blast.
Yeah.
And it's like now it's like I'm like, I look at some of the tools that we have available to us and the people that I know, and I'm like, man, it'd be so fun to make something. My problem is I can't write to save my life.
Yeah.
I'm a terrible writer. It just doesn't work. Which is weird because I grew up, I loved writing when I was a kid. But it just kind of like fell apart when all the, basically when you're going through English class in like middle school is where it fell apart because I'm like, why are you making this so hard for me? Literally, I was like, I love just writing these crazy stories. And then when they threw all the stuff like, oh, this is not how you write this sentence. I'm like, why? It's like, this was a great story.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's a lot of things, especially in sort of the film world, where it's like there needs to be this happens, then this happens. The
Right.
beats need to be there, or else it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember in college we had a screenplay course, and I think we were shown like Die Hard and Home Alone, and like both movies that I love. But the whole idea was like, this is the formula to make a movie. I think it was like everyone was pushing. There's a formula that that things need to happen in a certain time in a script, and if they don't meet that, then it's never going to be good. But then I think there's a lot of filmmakers out there and a lot of writers who kind of think completely out of the box in terms of like how movies are structured. Like, I can't forget. The what is it? Kaufman? The Being John Malkovich. You never saw Being John Malkovich?
I don't think so.
Oh my gosh. No? Okay.
No,
Being John Malkovich. It's a good, you should watch it.
I don't even know if I've heard of it. Really?
Yeah.
When did it come out?
I think 99, something like that,
Okay.
late 90s. Yeah, and
Interesting.
it's got a lot of great actors in it.
Huh.
Yeah. It's a Charlie Kaufman.
Andy, write
Charlie
that down.
Kaufman is the Charlie Kaufman is the guy who's the writer, but he's known for making these movies that just are kind of out there, just in scope in the story. They're just kind of bonkers, it's good. Check it out.
Absolutely.
It's great.
Absolutely. I'm going to switch gears quickly. So unless you have something
No.
on this. Oh, you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Except like, it's funny we were talking about making remakes of what like maybe you've done before,
Yeah.
just because you could do it better now. My buddy Warren and I did the same thing back in 7th grade.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it was Harold McNarold. This guy.
The movie he's talking about?
No, no. It was kind of horror-ish where he, it was a pumpkin, but he got kidnapped, and it was this evil scientist guy
Yeah.
that lived in a trailer. Actually, the old camper we got from your family.
Oh my gosh, I remember
Yes,
that
we
thing.
made that back in 7th grade. Whole chase sequence. Ended up doing it year after year. We had 3 parts, like 20-minute short films.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Wow.
That's gutsy.
yeah. So 7th,
Dang.
8th, 9th grade is what you do.
So,
Wait, so are you guys the same age?
no, he's 5 years older than me.
Oh, 5 years older.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, so how old are you?
I'm 21.
21. Oh, okay.
You're 26, right?
6, 7, 7. I think I'm 7.
Oh, really?
I think.
Whatever. I don't know how old
Yeah.
you are.
Wow, you're already losing it, man. Way too early.
I still
you're
write
7 years
2012
younger
on the
than you
date.
think you are right now, so apparently. So my adaptation of Exit 7A was the same idea of the hitchhiking thing.
It was in a house. It was in this, right?
No, that's a
Did you
different
film-
one.
Oh, okay.
That's a different
I'm thinking
one.
of a different one then.
That's actually funny because I watched that last night after talking to my high school film teacher. I
Oh,
went back
okay.
and looked at it, but
So I remember it was a horror movie, right?
that was not Exit 7A.
Okay.
That one was my favorite thing. I can't watch it now because I just cringe. But that was that was with the doll. Do you remember the doll?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what you're thinking.
Okay,
of.
that's what I'm
that
thinking
was
of.
a 22-minute. I mean, for
Oh.
I think that was my sophomore year of high school or something like that. But so anyway, I made this. I took the idea of the hitchhiking, and then they drove someplace, and then something happened where I tried to do the conversation, but my dialogue just fell apart. It was terrible. That's what ruined it. But basically, how it ended is, the person who was the driver in Exit 7A, like, couldn't get their car started or whatever, so called an Uber, and then that other person was the Uber driver. So that's kind of how we
The twist.
That's how we spun off it. It was a really cool last shot to reveal it, and then we just cut it. But man, I haven't made a short film. So what came first, the documentary or the coffee?
Documentary.
Okay, so let's talk about the documentary.
Yeah, that's right. Coffee.
What do you mean that's right? Well, didn't that take, how many years of that did you do?
Of the coffee? It's still going.
Well, so
It's 20.
Let's talk about it later.
2050. Okay, so we'll talk about
let's talk about the full length
going into the
doc, dude.
feature.
Yeah.
Right. So that was well, we had made two additional shorts in between the Exit 7A and the
So there's Checkup, and what's the other one?
it's not safe. So basically,
Oh, that's right.
There was we had written. Someone had gotten in touch with me from my old college and said, we're doing alumni are writing one-act plays, and we're going to put them on as one big show. So do you want to write something that will be incorporated into this 90-minute one-act play festival? So I said, okay. So I wrote one, and that was the checkup. And then Mike wrote the other one, It's Not Safe. And so what we did was we talked to the head of the department and basically said, hey, why don't we do this? How about we have students write plays and put them on as a show, and then we'll film the plays that the students wrote and we'll do it every year. So we ended up doing this for a couple of years, and then students took over and kind of did it to their group of friends. So we started it, and those were the two films that came out of that effort, which was fun because we basically had to, we made these two short films and adapted them from our stage plays, and the actors in the stage play were in the movie.
Oh, nice.
So it was, and then we had a festival where we screened them.
Dude, the checkup was hilarious.
So we did. So yeah, so that one.
Have you seen that one?
I have, but
Been a while.
Since it came out.
Yeah,
yeah.
I just remember it being hilarious.
And
that was a baby genitals one, right?
Yeah, that was right. That's you're correct. And I'm sure out of context that must sound strange. Trust me,
In
it is.
context, it's still strange.
Yeah. So that was So a guy basically goes into a doctor's office, and he's got some mild symptoms of something because he's a hypochondriac, and then they inform him that he has his baby genitals still, and they need to fall off in order for his adult pair to grow in. And so these doctors are diagnosing him with these crazy, strange illnesses.
It's awesome.
And he doesn't know it. So he starts to have like a anxiety attack. And, but that was again, one of those that I'm sure was inspired by being in hospitals for many, many years and filming stuff.
100%. Yeah.
And, so we filmed those, and that was a lot of fun. And then we were like, okay, let's focus on doing something that's a little bit bigger. I think we've got a few of these short films under our belt. We could probably, go after a little bit of a bigger story. And Mike had a friend who went to college. He was a few years older than me, so graduated with Mike, and he had become an ultra runner. And so he was training to do these, started with 50Ks, and then he did 50 milers. And now he was training to do a 100 miler. And we had this idea before, I think after Exit 7A, to do a documentary about this guy. And I think what ended up happening is that we were planning on doing it, and then one thing or another happened, and we couldn't film. And so he entered the Vermont 100, which is the 100-mile ultra marathon that happens in Vermont. And so he was running that, and so we were like, that would have been a cool idea, but he's going to run it, and whatever. And he ends up not finishing because I think at like mile 92, something in his knee burst.
Oh. 92.
Or no, it was, he sat down, he couldn't stand up. Like there was something where he got very close to the end.
Yeah.
And so we were like, oh, okay. It's horrible, but it's like, well, maybe we have another shot at making this movie, after all.
Yeah.
So we did. So he ends up starts training pretty much right afterwards because it takes, upwards of a year to even train to go that far on your legs. So we started filming right when he decided to do it again, and followed him for better part of a year. And then it took us about a year to edit.
That's crazy.
And so, and basically, it was something completely. The thing that I really liked about kind of the trajectory of films that we were making was that they were kind of different enough from each other that we were trying to do new things and not sort of like make the same movie over and over again. So the idea of doing something narrative and then being like, let's make a feature-length documentary about ultra running. It was not something that I was like, I love ultra running, so I'm going to make this. I didn't even know it was a thing. But, the story, the idea of it was more intriguing to me because it's not so much like people who love the movie Rocky. I don't think you really have to love boxing in order to love the movie Rocky because the idea of it is that he's going the distance. He's going up against something that he's, doesn't know if he's going to, make it or, win or whatever it is. So you're rooting kind of for the human spirit part of it and not so much like because you're like, know what a right hook is or anything like that. So that part of the film really kind of resonated with me because I'm like, oh, what does it take to do this? Like, what does it take to train for something like this? You know, he had that time, he and I both had infant kids, like 6 months, not even 6 month olds. And, you know, I'm kind of going out to make this film and he's going out to train nonstop. And I'm there with him for a lot of it. You know, it's kind of an interesting experience because it's, I was kind of coming up with just the, you know, the ideas and the, just kind of the scope of the movie as it was happening. Cause, you know, I had to kind of learn what was going on, what ultra running races are, who the people involved are, all that stuff. You know, I come in not knowing anything. So, which I think is a good place. Cause it's like, you can be a little bit, you can, you know, film stuff that, you know, ultra runners would be like, that's not interesting. But to someone who I don't know what's going on, you know, a lot of the audience is not going to know what's going on either, unless you,
right.
You know,
you're asking the right question,
right.
Showing the right thing.
So it's like, what's your mindset when you're, you know, you're at mile 50 and you're like, I only have 50 more miles to go. What are you like, what are you
right.
thinking?
Are you crying?
You say that to me
right.
and I'm like, oh man, why am I doing this? Like,
yeah, right.
And so you start to look at the psychological piece to this. And you know, it was just ended up being a fascinating, character study for me. And you know, I was shooting, a lot more footage and having to plan a lot more than I did for the short films, you know, because
right.
we ended up, I don't know, with hundreds of hours of footage that we had to edit down to 90 minutes. And, you know, Mike and I were scheduling a lot of the stuff and, you know, doing hundreds of interviews and driving all over the place to meet with these people to, you know, who, you know, a lot of the interviews that we didn't end up using because there was a lot that we didn't use. But again, it just, you know, it's for some reason, it's a weird thing doing a documentary because there is a complete unknown about everything that you're doing.
Was this a passion project or
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a blast to do. I mean, exhausting just
right, yeah.
in the fact that like, I don't know if I want to make another documentary ever again. Like I think I could probably make this one and be done. But just doing it was a blast, and you know, we traveled a ton for that, shooting that, and but again, going back to the fact that it's a complete unknown with a narrative. You have a script, you know what the
right.
story is, you know how it begins, you know how it ends. I know every single shot before I shoot it. This is just, you know, you're jumping off a cliff in the dark, and you like don't know what's underneath. Like that's you are just hoping that you get an interesting story and you're not wasting a year of your life filming something that someone's going to be like, I don't care about that. Why? And that the subject matter is compelling and that the goal is, though you may not understand it in the beginning of the film, you kind of start to understand it as the movie unravels. But that kind of stuff is, what I love about documentary filmmaking is just the vast unknown about what is even going to happen at the end. Like you don't know an ending. You have no idea how this is going to end. So it's you're literally experiencing your movie as it unfolds in front of you. It's kind of like
just the whole time you're like, he better freaking finish this race.
Well, and again, it's like we had a fairly significant talk during like the night before the race and being like, okay, like what do we do? You know, we rented a lot of equipment for the final the race day shooting. We had a huge crew with cameras because we had to follow them through 100 miles of backwoods Vermont. I mean, logistically kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
So we had a map of where everyone needed to be at what time, what his estimated time was when he was going to pull into certain aid stations. And so we had crews stationed and, you know, I was kind of floating between everything trying to, you know, and Mike we're on walkie talkies, we're on cell phones trying to communicate with people. And you're in God's country in Vermont, you're not getting to, you know, cell reception. It's like, there's nothing really you can do. It's like, you just need to be like, this is the time you need to be here. So, and again, you have to have conversations. What do we do? Like, okay, so we filmed almost all of this stuff, you know, what do we do in the event that, you know, he doesn't finish or, so you have to kind of plan and like, do we have to wait another year to film next year or like what do we do?
Right.
but again, that's the exciting part about documentary filmmaking is that you're just, a lot of times you don't know what you're shooting when you shoot it, and then you watch it and you're like, oh wow, that's a really interesting point. It fits really well with what this person's saying, and the movie starts to be made as you're making it,
Right.
and there's tricks on how to make scenes a little bit more dynamic and interesting and compelling, but you're just relying on interview questions and people to give good responses and to get compelling B-roll footage and stuff like that, and to do it so that it's not apparent that you're in the room with them. That's the hardest part, is like people being kind of freaked out by a camera when you're kind of following them around in a house or following them around outside or wherever you are at other races, and just like just having them act normally in their environment without being too preoccupied with, oh, there's a camera on me again.
Right. So, how are you making money during this year?
Oh no, I mean I'm
So you're working just in production
I'm
somewhere else?
at that point I was kind of transitioning, but I was doing my own stuff. So I was.
So this
I
was
had
your
sort
free
of
time.
I sort of a luxury in that I had accounts of my own that I was shooting at that point. So I had time free where I could take some time off during a week, and also use my evenings to edit everything. So I remember it was fiscally a tough year for sure, because it was I had put a lot of effort into the documentary, not so much effort into the other stuff to make money. So
And
there
it
was,
was-
what's that?
And you have like a newborn kid.
And that was another stressor. Again, it's not the easiest. I'm not saying it's
Right.
it's easy and that all of your painstaking work will be worth it, because it's you're making a movie.
Trust
that
me,
you're-
honey, this doc's gonna pay off.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh no, believe me, they're gonna be calling me after this. You can guarantee that's not gonna happen. I mean, very seldom do you get like any kind of deal or anything like that. It's not. I mean, you can pretty much guarantee that's not going to happen. I mean, there are instances where it does, and that's great. But I mean, if you're banking on that as like your ticket,
That's like expecting a video to go viral.
it's
in today's term.
a lot of it is luck, and a lot of it is again, it's I don't think that's the reason you make movies, at least not for me. I mean, some people will want to make movies with the one intent on making $1 million, but again, if that's what your mindset is going into it, it's going to be a very brutal awakening at the end.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
What's your mindset on editing when you have hundreds of hours of media and the interviews are wonderful, but you can't include everything?
Oh, I mean, the first cut of the movie is like 5.5 hours long. Like, it's like, honestly, it's like, it is you're basically putting the best stuff in your first cut, and the first cut, if it's a documentary, is going to be, it's like, oh, maybe we should make this a 2-part documentary, or, no, it's like you
and then you just keep trimming.
and then you
trimming
just
and
keep on being
trimming.
like, that's not important, and then your story starts to really take shape. It's like you're kind of
Yeah.
just like sculpting this statue, and you're just kind of
That's
like,
honestly my favorite part.
it is mine too. I spent I don't even know
It's got to be under 90 minutes.
the hundreds of hours I spent and then when you're in a spot where you can't move, I'm just going to go back and watch more interviews, and literally just sitting there like watching interviews of people talking, and then you're like, okay, there it is. There's what I need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that'll fit here, and then it'll transition into this part.
Right.
Again, it's like an archaeological dig. You're basically digging
Yeah.
through all of your stuff to try and create a compelling story and a compelling narrative, which is it's not easy. You just have to basically be watching and listening and making notes, and keep fairly detailed and good notes, and then be organized when you're editing, because that's like one of the biggest downfalls with an editor is if you're doing something with a large scope and a lot of footage, is keeping track of footage and organizing it.
Yeah.
Because especially when you get a timeline that starts to get into an hour and a half long.
Hours. Right. Cut. Hours.
Right. So, and then it's like, okay, I need going through it and literally watching that 4-hour movie
Yeah.
every night And then the next night it's 3 hours and 45 minutes. Okay, we're getting there. And then the next night's 3.5 hours. Like you start to just like take chunks of this thing off. And then you get to the point when you've got a 2 hour and 45 minute movie. Then you show it to someone and say, is this compelling? Because you get to the point where you're watching this stuff so much.
Right.
Yeah.
You forget, kind of what you're doing at a certain point. You're just sort of like, I think this is good. Right?
Absolutely.
Does it make sense? Does this make sense? So
Yeah, you know the whole story.
right. It makes sense to
Yeah.
me, but for someone going into this thing,
They're
not
like, no,
knowing.
this whole section's boring. That's irrelevant.
and there was again, it's like when you get criticism, it's like some people being like, I don't get why this person's saying that. It's like, oh yeah, of course you didn't, because you
weren't there.
You didn't see
Right.
that footage that I cut.
Yeah.
10 drafts ago, that part makes sense. It's like, and you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. And you start to kind of have to train your own brain to look at cuts and look at footage from an outside perspective, because you can get kind of, in your own head about it.
See, I find myself doing a lot of like promotional documentary stuff, meaning 3-minute documentaries, basically.
Oh, yeah.
And
Those are
it's
great.
like, it's a blast when you get past the first hurdle. And the first hurdle for me is like just getting that first story down has always been to get a story with, you're looking at, 10 interviews.
Yeah.
To build that first story that logically has an arc and makes sense.
Yeah.
Is like, I'm doing it right now on this project and I'm sick of it, dude. I am sick of it. And I'm like, I just want the story to work. But then once you get it, then then it's fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because then it just falls into place as you cut it down. And,
Oh, yeah.
Oh gosh, I love that. But I'm just not there yet on this thing.
And those like 2-3 minute documentaries, like there's like so much you can do in that space.
Oh,
just to
absolutely.
make it compelling. Because you're making like a trailer, basically. You're kind of making like a
Highlight reel.
highlight reel.
Yeah.
And I probably spent so much time on the trailer to the documentary, like trying to. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to fit hundreds of hours into 90 minutes. Now I have to try to fit that 90 minutes into like 2 minutes.
Right, exactly.
So going back over the footage and being like, taking out the pieces that make sense, that kind of shape it to the viewer as to like what it's about. Like that's, again, another challenge altogether, is trying to compress that into such a small space. Trailer editing is one of those things that's very, very, I find it difficult to try to put those things together. I don't know.
I can't, man, a 90-minute doc. That's
Yeah, it's not.
That's hard.
It's again. I slept at my office several times,
yeah.
being like, I'm on a roll. I just needed to have like a nap, or again, it's its own marathon. Like it's totally its own thing.
Would you do it again?
Probably.
Really?
I think so.
With
If
the
I had
right
the
story.
right story, like if it's compelling, I'd be interested in doing it. I don't know if I would. I don't know. It's a 2-year commitment. Like it's
Right.
like you're signing a 2-year lease at that point, and it's way expensive sometimes.
For
So-
sure.
And we raised our money for the doc on Kickstarter,
Oh, okay.
and so we had a little bit to help out with making it.
And that's going to like flights and
It's going to flights,
or like
it's going
travel
to
in general.
rentals. Like we rented a lot of equipment, especially for the race shoot, because we needed so many cameras.
Right.
That and we were able to get people who were who bring their own camera, and then I'm left with 900 formats to at the end of the day I've got SD cards and someone's shooting in 4K, and this was shooting in so many different
Right.
things like that it got the post-production got a little bit insane. I mean,
Would you edit that in?
it was Final Cut 7.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that was sort
Wait,
of
when did this come out?
2015, 14.
Oh, okay.
Something like that.
What are you editing on now?
So Premiere
Okay.
primarily. I never really took the jump to Final Cut X.
Yeah.
I stayed with 7, and then I transitioned to Premiere because it was much more similar to Final Cut 7
Yeah,
than,
that's what I did.
because I never really, Final Cut X seemed a little bit more like iMovie to me. Like it was sort of like they dumbed it down
Yes.
a lot. I thought, but
It's very prosumer.
yeah, I think that's the direction they went in, and I wasn't really comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I like Adobe's, suite of programs. I use, Photoshop for pretty much everything. And After Effects, I used for all the aerial footage that we were doing because the stabilization software in After Effects is really, really good. But yeah, so Premiere is pretty much what I edited in.
Yeah. Wow. All in Final Cut 7.
Final Cut 7. Yeah. It was I don't know. I had a lot of those heart-stopping crashes that were like,
Oh no.
did I just lose 3 or 4 hours of my time? And
that's
sometimes
rough.
I did, and I'd have to re-edit scenes, and it was just like, so annoying.
Yeah. Can we talk about coffee?
Sure.
Yeah. So you got out of film for a bit.
Yeah,
Or did you?
I was still. So I ended up selling my side of the marketing business, and then we started the Cold Brew Coffee Company. But I was still doing. I had video clients that I was doing work with, pretty much to pay bills.
Throughout all of the cold.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had some accounts that I brought over from the agency that we ran, and then kind of got word of mouth. I met a bunch of people through the documentary film festivals that we went to, and worked a lot with that.
Gotcha.
Worked locally for a bunch of people for doing promotional videos and things like that. And so that was sort of keeping me afloat while I was doing the coffee business. So I decided, let's just do a complete 180. Maybe the documentary probably had a little bit to do with that. I'm sure it was sort of like at the end, like
None of the coffee was good enough to get the editing done.
And I was drinking enough of it during that process, honestly. And it was. I don't know. I definitely. I'm the kind of person, and it's probably not the best tendency, but when I see something or I want to do something, I just sort of go do it without planning anything, nothing. I won't really. I don't want to say think about it before I do it, but I definitely have impulsive tendencies to just be like, "That's a great idea. Let's do it."
To start a coffee company.
Let's do that. Fine, bottled coffee.
Well, these are the
What do we
people
think?
that you want in the filmmaking world, is what you
and
were
I think
saying.
I was taking a lot of that in terms of, let's make a feature-length documentary on a sport that I know nothing about. Sure.
Yeah, here we go.
Great.
I'm about it. It's great.
And luckily I was able to work with people, in the doing those films that were like-minded. And so I think that's kind of one of the tendencies you need to have in order to do that. A lot of it is sort of and then you get a little bit older and you're like, you're a little bit more selective about what you do because you just don't have the energy anymore.
Yeah. So wait, where were you approached by someone with the idea of Cold Brutus, or was that
So we had a relationship with some local roasters, and I think we were basically just like, what can we do with coffee that no one else is doing, or only a few people are doing? And I had been drinking cold brew coffee for a while. I think towards the end of the editing process of the documentary, I was drinking a lot of coffee, and cold brew was more caffeinated. So I was like, "Yep, I'm going to go with that." And that was sort of that. That's what took me through several of the all-nighters.
and also this was long before cold brew was a thing.
It was before cold brew was a thing. I think there was a couple companies who were doing it. I know Stumptown was the one that I drank the most of, and I was like, "Who else is doing this? Who else is in this space?" And there wasn't a lot going on, so I was like, "Well, then let's figure out how to make it and do it." And that's essentially what we did. Because
In a nutshell.
Again, it was like you couldn't really, you can go to Barnes and Noble and buy a book on how to brew beer or how to brew a lot of beer. What's the scaling? there was people who it's like, yeah, I make my own cold brew in a mason jar, you know, a 64 ounce mason jar, and this is how much coffee I use. But 64 ounces, I want 64 gallons. Like, how much coffee do I add there?
Yeah.
And then you're starting to think about scales that are just like, how do you filter all the coffee? What do you do with all the coffee afterwards? Like, these are things that we had no idea. So it was just sort of like, let's go out and figure it out, do a bunch of tests. So we roasted a whole bunch of coffee to all different levels. We cold brewed it. We found the bean and the flavor that we liked. And then we were like, how do we make 50 gallons? Because we want to start kegging this and, you know, having cold brew on draft. And so we got a 55 gallon kettle, like a beer kettle. And then we figured out, okay, how do we keep the grounds out of the line so we can filter it? And it was a nightmare. Like, it was an absolute nightmare. But we finally got it to the point where we could actually make a product. And we went to a local beverage distributor, and they liked it, and they said, yeah, let's do it. And so at that point, we didn't even have a bottle yet. We just had it in kegs.
Yeah, it started I forgot about it.
Started in
bottle.
kegs. Yeah, so the kegs came first. The kegs were what started it, and then we were like, we really need to have like a single serve version of this. So then we started bottling it, and that's where it started. And then it was 5 years ago.
Only 5?
I think it was 5. Yeah.
Oh wow.
15.
This thing like kind of blew up though.
Would
you not say that? In my terms, it did, because when I started seeing, I remember the moment that I saw cold brew at Starbucks for the first time.
Oh yeah,
and I was like,
yeah, that was a big deal.
But like the way I saw it,
was essential though, because it was like that legitimized the category. I think
really
cold brew, because it's like when you see, you know, small companies in that point, Stumptown was still fairly small, and then you see Starbucks, like, you have a cold brew now. It's like, oh, okay, that's actually great, because now people are gonna. You don't have to educate people on what cold brew is.
With it.
People are getting familiar with, you know, what cold brew is.
Also, cold brew is so much better. Like, can we just say that it's just so much better than normal coffee?
Great. Yeah,
but anyway, I just remember seeing that, and I was like, they've been doing this forever. And now Starbucks is, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's insane.
I think they came like 2 years afterwards.
Yeah, it was a long time.
It was a long time.
Then came Dunkin', and I was like,
now everybody's got
now cold. I went to a cold brew bar in Rhode Island once.
No kidding.
All they did was cold brew.
Wow.
Like nitro and everything.
Yeah.
And then you did nitro long before anybody else that I saw.
Yeah, we were one of the. I mean, it was just in Vermont. I don't know if there was anyone else doing it, but yeah, I mean, it was the first one in fairly wide distribution in Vermont.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting, because I think in the time we were trying to get people to understand, it's not iced coffee, it's, you know, and cold brew, and they're two completely different things.
Right.
I think it started to just kind of, you know, spiral into a point where now people are preferring cold brew to iced coffee.
Oh, 100%.
And, you know, and it's cool, because, you know, we were able to grow we grew fairly slowly. I mean, we weren't.
Did you?
Yeah, we weren't. We got into, I think, 4 or 5 states with distribution, but you know, it's, again, trying to just drop not just a new product, but a fairly new category onto people, and really with zero marketing budget. Like, we were just like, it was all word of mouth. Like, we were just, you know, put a new tap handle there, and people are going to have to walk up to it and be like, what the heck is this? Because we didn't have money to spend on anything. It was just like production, get it out there, get people tasting it, do live in-person tastings, and those kind of things. And that's basically what I was doing, is just going out and going to, you know, beverage festivals. We were pretty big in a lot of like brewery festivals. But yeah, it's interesting. And then doing some collaborations with different companies. You know, it's a lot of fun. And it was a completely different than what I was doing before, because it was, you know, I'm now selling a product, like a consumable product, and it's different than anything I'd done.
Yeah.
So that part was really like, it was awesome to do something like that, because I like just keeping things fresh, and, you know, so I'm not stagnating, you know, a lot.
Yeah.
I think that tends to happen. You get into a groove, you're going to do the same thing a million times. don't know if there's something about it where I don't like doing that. I like to keep
Sure.
on kind of moving to the next thing.
And product development and beverage development is awesome.
And then, you're spending a lot of time in breweries, because I was talking with a lot of different people, because I'm like, there's got to be a lot of technology that they're using to filter their beer or to brew their beer that we can use from them. So a lot of it was like understanding how a lot of these, this equipment works. And then, kind of retrofitting beer tanks for cold brewing. It's a completely new thing. And then filtration. A lot of it was, and then when we started canning the nitro cold brew using a liquid nitrogen doser, it's like I had to figure out. I got a big giant tank of liquid nitrogen, and now I got to figure out how to dose each can. And there's not anyone who does that. Like the liquid nitrogen dosers were for like dosing waters and other non-carbonated beverages.
Just as a purge.
Like a purge, so there's no oxygen. So it basically drops it in there, all the oxygen gets pushed out, and then they can it. And it's, it's got rigidity, and it's, so you're not like squeezing a floppy can that's full of air,
Yeah.
So it's like, well, we can probably, talking with these companies who are explaining to me how this thing works and the pressure level that gets built up in a can and how much pressure you can have in a can. And if I was to dose this with liquid nitrogen, then shake it up really hard to mix in the nitrogen, and then I popped it, I'd get that Guinness Cascade, right? A lot of it was like, yeah, I think so. I think we could probably do that. So it's like, fine, that sounds great.
Wow.
So it's like, we bought the liquid nitrogen doser. We'll figure out how to use it. It's like, how hard could it be? I mean, and then it's like, oh yeah, the liquid nitrogen is like 300 degrees, like negative 300 degrees. So, just wear gloves. I don't know. And again, it's like a lot of that stuff is just sort of like doing it and failing at it. And like filmmaking, it's sort of like, you gotta just fail in order to get better. And, those are the experiences that I think you learn the most from is doing it, failing at it. And then it's like, okay, this is how you do it. And, the next one gets better, and then the next, and then the next. So, that's sort of how I look at these things.
What a weird trail of filmmaking to
Yeah.
go and start a freaking cold brew coffee company
Yeah.
before anybody really else knew about cold brew, in my opinion.
Yeah, there was only
was
only a
early
few,
in
but
the
it was
beverage
early.
industry.
It was early on, for sure. But and now it's kind of everywhere.
Yeah. So where are you still involved at all? Mm-hmm. Okay, so how much? What are you doing now?
So before we did everything ourselves. We kegged, we brewed, we bottled all ourselves, which was kind of grueling work. I mean, it was literally just like sweaty warehouse buckets
Yeah.
of coffee grounds just smelling like cigars all day long, because that's just what coffee smells like when it's in your pores. And literally like getting caffeine buzzes from touching so much coffee. Like it just
Seriously?
seeps into you.
Yeah.
And like
Wow. I
you
didn't
just
know.
get like so much. I'd be like, okay, I need to like sit down, because I'd be getting just like so much caffeine absorbed.
No way.
When you get cold brew spills on your arm or wherever, it's like I'm emptying gross coffee grounds. It just gets on you, and then you're just kind of like, whew, man, it's like this is insane.
Wow. And I would have never thought of that.
Yeah. I never thought of it either until I started getting like like panic attacks.
Right.
Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 cups of coffee kind of level of.
Yeah, and it's
Wow.
like the oils, just like if you're not wearing gloves, the oils of the coffee will just like seep into your pores and just caffeinate you from the outside.
Wow.
Yeah, so I forget what I was talking
Your
about.
involvement
Oh
now.
yeah. So now basically we have co-packers that do all the brewing and canning and kegging for us.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of like hands off, I don't do production anymore.
Gotcha. So you're an owner or the owner? An owner?
One of the owners. Yep.
Okay. So you're just letting the company run, basically.
Letting the company run. A lot of it is we deal with the distributors, and now we do refrigerated trucking, so we're not hand delivering stuff. So the business model kind of changed as we were able to grow and scale it. And now we're basically, since since March, all of our on-premise keg business is pretty much gone,
Oh, wow.
as most of the other beverage industries, when you couldn't get beer or any other beverage on premise at restaurants or bars, it sort of just went to single serve cans, and that was where our business ended up going. Luckily, we were small enough and nimble enough that we can kind of move around without losing a ton. But we did lots of our biggest market in kegs was offices. So in New York City, we had a distributor that distributed all of our kegs to big offices.
How cool would that be?
Yeah, it's a nice office perk.
Yeah,
I want one. I want a keg handle in my office.
And that's the thing. And like we'd get into these big offices, and they were going through 3-4 kegs a day.
Holy crap.
And then they'd have to put limits on like how many you'd be able to get, because they'd be pouring 30-ounce cups of cold brew and just like drinking. I mean,
Oh, well, it's so good though. Oh,
Yeah, but it's so strong.
It's so
Yeah,
strong.
right.
That's the thing. It's like people
Right.
were just getting jacked up on caffeine, like to dangerous levels.
Caffeine high.
it's
and-
what, two and a half times?
It's
or
like
something?
it's like 2x, like 2 cups of coffee,
Wow.
1 cup of cold brew.
That's
so
intense,
it's,
yeah.
you have too much of it. It's
Start freaking out.
And if you're caffeine sensitive, I mean, like obviously there's some people who are sensitive to caffeine, and I don't recommend it. So when they're like, "Why is this making me jittery?" I'm like, I don't know, because you probably are not used to drinking like basically an espresso.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of what's happening now. Just, it's starting to pick up probably a little bit more. I mean, we're still getting keg orders, but not in any way the volume that we were.
Right.
And just talking to other beverage company owners around, it's most everyone, it's a 40%, 50% decrease overnight, because all the on-premise was closed down. So however many kegs are out in the field, they're just locked down until further notice, and you may have to be eating a ton of your inventory because it's not being purchased.
Well, if you need to get any kegs off your hand, just
Yeah, you
can
got
let
a
us know.
kegerator?
You
You got a
can-
kegerator down here?
I can probably figure it out. I can figure out how to get it out.
That's like my mindset.
yeah,
I can figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Give it to me.
Dude, that's awesome. I love when you guys went that direction. It was really good. I quit caffeine my senior year of high school.
You did?
I did.
Because of me?
No, I'm just kidding. No, because I thought I had insomnia. I could never sleep.
Whoa.
And turns out I'm very sensitive to caffeine.
There it
So
is.
I got a lot more energy when I stopped drinking it, obviously because I started sleeping again.
Yeah.
But now it's like my superpower. To where there's certain days like on shoots and stuff, when I have like a really long day, I'll take caffeine and it's like I'm literally Superman. I mean, it's awesome because
Just,
it's just like a whole nother level of productivity.
You've tapped into
I've got
like a plutonium.
Yeah, I've got it figured out, dude.
Yeah.
It's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Nice.
But anyway, yeah, that stuff was so good. So I didn't know that you were still filmmaking through that whole journey. I thought you were pretty much all just coffee, but
it was no like narrative stuff. It was
Gotcha.
corporate videos.
Yep.
But yeah, hey, I mean, like when people call up and want you to make videos, it's like,
Are asking to give you money.
I can do that.
yeah, well, exactly. So you're basically working for yourself though.
Yes. I mean, all the people who are coming, needing video stuff were just kind of, word of mouth type things.
Right. So you made those connections working for an agency.
Right. And yeah, pretty much working for a bunch of other people. A lot of people would hire me just to kind of help out with their overflow and things like that. So that was kind of the stuff I was doing then.
Yeah.
And also just to kind of keep it going. Like a lot of times it's like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, you kind of lose it. So
Sure,
if
yeah.
it's, if it's editing, you kind of want to keep on editing something, even if it's something that's, a personal project or whatever it is, or just something for fun, and also like, I am constantly on YouTube and watching a bunch of other people's work. So, that kind of stuff, it's like you want to keep on
Yep.
kind of and still learning and understanding what's out there and keeping up with cameras. I mean, that's a whole other thing too.
Right.
Just being like, oh my gosh, they made another one of that. Like that was.
Yeah, right. We're on
How
the
much is it?
A7S3 already. Like, that's what blew my mind this past week or something. I'm like, there's 3 of them.
And back in the day, it was like the 5D Mark II, and that was like, whoa,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Now, how many of them are there? Like,
I have
don't
the
know.
4.
You got the 4?
So there's at least 4 of them.
Hey, those full frame sensor cameras, they're great.
They are beautiful.
Yeah.
You're working for a dealer.
I am.
What's the story there?
So it was once we kind of went and all the production was kind of moved, out of house. I was like, oh, I have tons of time now. And dealer was basically looking for someone to kind of start a new department within their managed services, so the design and all that stuff. And they need someone basically to start a video department there. And
how did you even know about this?
It was kind of like someone had told me that they were thinking about that, and so I was like, oh yeah, and
I could help out.
I got in touch, and that was how it happened.
Wow. So you're doing what there?
Basically, it's I'm editing footage from different dealerships and making either animations or videos for cars.
Oh,
Yeah,
right on.
yeah,
How long have you been doing that now?
like a year.
Dude,
Yeah,
sweet.
yeah. So
You've
it's
done a lot, bro.
I want to keep it going, and obviously it's it was a different thing because I work primarily in After Effects. It's kind of I
At dealer?
yeah. So I basically all the animation stuff I do is primarily in After Effects, and it was something that I was like, I need to be better at this program, and
After Effects is a beast.
I know, and it's so dense, and there's so much you can do with it. And I was using it to some extent with video stuff, but not really, just for like titles and things like that.
Right. Yeah, same.
But now I'm doing like full videos in After Effects and just kind of utilizing like the power of that program, and it's a lot of fun.
Huh.
And trying to like automate stuff, like trying to use like scripting and things like that. I'm into that too. So it's fun. It's definitely something that I hadn't done a lot of. Like, I hadn't done a lot of car. I did a couple car commercials, but not in this kind of 30-second type window.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
How old are you?
36.
So when you were, 20s running around with a camera, did you enjoy editing at all? So let me say something first.
Yeah.
I don't really like editing.
What?
I know.
You don't like editing?
So I would much rather be running around with a camera.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's
is my thing.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that's going to change later.
I mean,
Now that you're in After Effects.
I love editing. I'm
do you?
one of those people that just loves to kind of.
Well, don't get me wrong.
See it cut up and.
I love the whole process.
Yeah.
But I enjoy being out just grinding on it with a camera.
Yeah, I definitely like on location stuff. That's the more fun, I think, is doing takes, and especially now that you have tools that are like brushless gimbals and things like that are just like making things so much easier to get shots that are like, I mean, I had sliders and all kinds of gear that was just like hardware gear that I need to have like 10 feet of space in order to have my
dolly
track and, all this stuff to get like a dynamic shot. Now I can just like carry it around like a briefcase, and it's just like
just walk steady.
yeah, and obviously when that came out, I think that was 5-6 years ago. Like I immediately rented one, and I'm just like, I need to walk around with this and learn about this because this is going to make my life.
You're
so
talking
much
like
easier.
a Ronin or like a
the Movi. I think I rented the M5.
Yep.
And just put like the smallest DSLR I had on there, and just like was like, oh man, okay. And then again, it opens up the.
Yeah,
it's another tool you can start to use and think about. Oh my gosh, if I, how much easier it would have been with this. Like I was doing ice skating videos that I couldn't do before. Just to get like angles.
Yeah.
Where you can and you've got someone who can operate the actual gimbal. It's like, oh man, this is just like, those kind of things. I'm constantly.
The production value.
Production
is so much.
It's so much fun to do. But then again, and then I do like sitting down and getting all the footage together and organizing it and starting to put pieces together. Like there's definitely a the editing process. It's definitely it's a grind for sure. Like and you have to kind of realize that what you're getting into.
I enjoyed it more when I was drinking coffee.
Yeah, I guess
I'm
that's
being
true.
entirely honest.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
yeah.
Because I used to love that process of sitting down,
Getting into the zone.
Like what I would do
Yeah.
is it would be one of those things where I would get home from school, right, or whatever. Around 5 o'clock, I would get a cup of coffee and edit until tomorrow, and I loved it.
No wonder you
I
couldn't sleep.
loved it. Like there's nothing better when you're so amped on a project and coming straight home and editing it.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's the thing. It's a different mindset with editing. If you love, you can't wait to edit it. Like
Right.
that's a lot of the stuff that's like I could wait to edit it, but when you're working on something that either you're shooting or that is something close to you either wrote it or whatever. There's a definite urge to be like I want to go. I'm going to edit the whole thing tonight.
Yeah.
I'm gonna,
and that's the best.
yeah,
I love
Cam,
that.
you start shooting corporate stuff and you're just gonna melt in your office chair. Like, this sucks.
Well, yeah, it's like it's one of those.
and that's where you're like, I've got a template for this. Like
Right.
I've got videos that I've done that are basically this
Right.
is the what I'm doing. I know what questions to ask. I've got basically the same video that I'm making. It's in a different location.
I know that's kind of like what I'm doing right
crank
now,
it out.
actually. But
And-
I wish I had more of a template.
I mean, that is kind of what it is. It's like I honestly do literally have templates where it's like with music beds, and I do love editing to music. There's
Yeah.
definitely something that I do like about that. So music videos have always been fun things
Those
to
are a
do.
blast. I love music videos.
Yeah,
those are
and-
just you can do whatever the heck you want. And
Yeah.
it works.
Oh yeah, and it works.
That's
Like I've
the
been
best
doing a lot
part.
of like abstract videos to sort of like instrumental electronic stuff and just sort of like making weird things. I don't know. There's just something where you start to my taste is starting to slowly devolve back into like simpler setups, like shooting a lot more on like Super 8. Like I've got a Super 8 camera and I've been like shooting on.
Huh.
And just like it's a completely different kind of filmmaking. Like
That's interesting.
literally film. Like
Yeah.
no one really knows about this. Like no one's really worked on it in their spare time. But yeah, I mean, Super 8 filmmaking I've really gotten into because there's now places you can basically shoot your 8mm film stock, send it away, it gets processed, transferred, and they send you back a 4K, ProRes digital file. It's like it just looks cool. Like it's like there's like
awesome.
an aesthetic to it that's just you can't get with an app. I guess you probably could, but
Yeah.
Color grades get close, but
yeah, and you can get it in the color correction is just again you've got the dynamic range to do like so much with the color correction. I love it. I love that kind of stuff. And I've been playing more music recently, kind of getting back into that and doing like music videos for those kind of things. And so, it's just, I love doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Huh.
you mentioned a couple times organizing your project and laying it out. What are a couple like key things that you do to organize projects?
I mean, I all the cards are labeled and I have basically scene folders. I mean, if you're talking about narrative stuff, it's basically like scene, take 1, 2, 3, 4, like everything's slated and organized in that way. So I know which takes are good, which takes are bad. If you're organizing it in a bin in either Premiere or Final Cut, you can have like circle takes and like, this is the best take of that. These other takes are no good. And you just build these big files of scenes, and then that makes editing a lot easier once you kind of can be like, okay, that's the best take, that's the best take of that, here's
Gotcha,
another angle, here's my close-up, here's those kind of things. For the other stuff, a lot of it is just I usually know in camera that a take is or a piece of B-roll or something is good, so I'll usually make audio notes in the footage. So I'll talk to myself as the editor and be like, use this take. This is a really good one.
Oh, I
Whatever.
do that.
Like I make notes to myself all the time in
Yeah.
camera. And that helps a lot because I'll I'll usually think something while I'm shooting it, and if I don't tell myself what it is,
Yeah,
like,
you're
if I
not
don't-
gonna remember
I'll
that.
watch it back and be like, what was I thinking during that? What was why did I think this was a good idea? Or like,
Yeah, why not shoot that again?
yeah, and it's like, why? And then if again, it sounds weird, but if I tell myself this is what I'm thinking in that exact moment, I'll forget about it because I've shot so much stuff, and I'll go back to editing it and
Right.
be just like, not know where I am.
Yeah.
So there are things like that. But other than that, I don't know. It's kind of just a crapshoot. It's really, honestly, it is.
So
It's
you're-
sort of just
yeah.
like you're sort of relying on having relatively good organizational skills and having good footage to begin with.
Yeah. That's the key.
Yeah,
That is
like
the
if
key.
you can't really do much in the editing room if the footage sucks,
Right.
or whatever. So
Exactly. How you doing?
Good.
You good?
Yep.
Like good to wrap up?
Yep. Yeah, I have
are we
nothing
at?
more on my notes there.
This was awesome, man.
thanks so
Thank,
much.
thank you for doing this. I mean, the only other thing we would ask is where you're headed. If you have any dreams or aspirations to do when you grow up.
When I grow up, yeah, I don't know.
The next
Again-
coffee, you gonna build a rally car? Or?
Sure. Hey, I would love to. I don't know.
I know a guy.
Well, you got one of those. You got like one of those little
I got a
dune buggies,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Dad's got a kick our dune buggy.
Yeah.
That's-
Those things are pretty sweet. You
Yeah,
can you can kind of tool around with one of those. Is it a 2-seater?
Yeah, with a jump seat in the back, so you
Okay.
can fit 4.
Oh,
But
4 in that thing.
I mean, you, yeah,
On a good day.
that's
you
a
got to
death
tuck,
wish.
tuck your feet under the seats.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the kind of thing like 10 grand you could build it brand new, ground up.
Really?
Yeah, they're
What?
pretty cheap.
I mean, they're basically
Wow.
just like VW engines, right? It's
Yeah,
like a little.
yeah, it's a Volkswagen Bug, short and pan,
Yeah.
fiberglass, and like all aftermarket parts are
Yeah.
like cheap from China, ready to bolt together. It's
Yeah.
Interesting.
pretty neat.
Yeah. Those things are a lot of fun. So maybe that. I don't know. I've stopped buying new gear. Pretty much, and if in some instances getting rid of as much as I can.
Yeah.
Because I started basically renting everything as I need it. So I'm just like I'm sort of sick of like buying something and then like 2 years later I need to buy something else. So it's just like if I ever get like one of those jobs, I just rent everything and just bill it
Yeah.
like as a rental. It's just
there you
like,
go. Why not?
Then you know it's always going to work. It's always going to be the newest
always- yeah.
piece. And
you know, you can sink a lot of money onto that, and if you're not getting video gigs like all the time, it's tough to like, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
So
are you doing stuff on the side now too, still, or mostly?
not really. I mean, like every once in a while. I mean, the video side of things I've done mainly to do like music videos, like
Yeah.
for myself or for friends.
Yeah.
Like if you go to Spotify, Leon Ampersand, that's me. You can hear my music.
Seriously.
Yeah. I've been recording a lot of music
Oh, interesting.
recently. Yeah. Another weird thing that's kind of come full circle from the early aughts. Because before I was playing in a band, like a touring band,
Really?
and then while I was early on in that ad agency.
Did you play like guitar or something?
Yeah, played guitar, sang. It was fun. Rock
Good
and
grief.
roll.
You've been busy.
I can't stay in one.
You can't sit still.
Well, I can't stay. I can't stay in one medium. Is I guess what I.
You've had too much cold brew. Yeah.
I can't. I haven't gotten too much into painting yet, but it's basically been video, music, radio,
Yeah.
stage. I love just like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just something that
Sure.
I can move around in fairly comfortably, I think.
Dude. Last question.
Yeah.
How long do you think this has been? Unless you've looked at a clock.
I haven't looked at a clock.
Well, don't look.
I won't look. I don't know. 2 hours?
2:16.
Wow. Is that the longest so far?
It might be.
Really?
Yeah.
It's close.
I think it might be. The
Joe's
one-
is just over 2.
Who?
Joe's. His was
Oh,
220
yeah.
maybe.
Pretty darn close, dude. Well, hey, this has been awesome. It's been
Yeah.
awesome to learn about you and
Yeah.
what you've done because I haven't really known, honestly.
I
I've
know.
seen
It's
some
been
of the-
kind of weird. Just sort of been on the periphery, right? It's just
Right, exactly.
yeah.
It's one of those. It's one of those things. I don't really know what you're up to, other than I just.
I don't know half the time. Apparently
you-
it's a weird. It's definitely strange. Like, just years passed and like being like, what year was that? Oh, that was, I don't know, 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, it starts to just sort of blend together. And then, I don't know.
Right.
It's getting to that point where I'm just like, wait a second, what? My 10-year anniversary? Like, oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah. Two kids.
What year is this? Like,
You have 2 kids, right?
2 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it starts to be like, oh man,
It's crazy.
boy, it goes by quick. So yeah, it's been fun to discuss all those fun things from however many years ago.
That's awesome, man. I love filmmaking.
If people want to find some of these projects that you've worked on, how can they do that?
Yeah, so the short films and the documentary Hammer and Saw Films, you could probably go on Vimeo and find all those, or YouTube and find all those different things. Hammer and Saw. And then, yeah.
The doc. Where's the doc?
That's on Vimeo too, I think. Yeah, it's on
Called
Vimeo.
100
Head, Heart, Feet.
That's it.
And I think that's pretty much it. The Leon Ampersand. You can go listen to some of that stuff.
There you go.
I did a music video for that. Maybe I'll post all my 8mm home movies.
There you go. And you can buy Cold Brutus at
Sure, go buy
your
Cold
local
Brutus.
grocery store.
You should seriously like get into some 8mm filmmaking. It's a
Sounds
lot
like a
of
blast.
fun. Yeah,
I've seen some real 8mm recently, and it's
Yeah.
like just awesome.
it's cool. Yeah, it's really. There's also some kind of lower tiered 16mm cameras that are pretty awesome. Like if
Yeah.
you really want to shoot some like cool grainy Vermont
Yeah.
footage,
Stuff.
like there's some.
That's one of those things where you just like go and do a hike and like shoot it, but
Retro
it's like
vibe.
then you can put some artistic voiceover on it, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just
Dude, if you like go hiking with a Super 8, it looks like it looks like nothing you can shoot with any other camera.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's just sweet,
yeah, and you put like some song behind it. It's like
right?
yeah, looks like it's from the 1960s.
And it's just
like
got this
wild.
this.
You
you know?
It's got a grainy.
Know what I'm talking about?
It's got that
Great.
thumb
Yeah,
and forefinger.
that.
I don't know. There's just something about the format that I just love, and the fact that you can develop and transfer it into 4K, and something that you can actually.
Yeah,
you know,
that's super cool.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that part of it is really cool. If I had to set up a projector and run it in my house for people, I'd probably be a different story. But now, you can shoot it and kind of edit it the way you would normally would
Yeah.
anything else. So it's just a couple extra steps. You just don't see the footage until after you're done. Like that's
Right.
one thing you have to get used to is be like, I think I got it. I think my exposure was right. We'll see in a couple weeks when I get the film back. Like it's
True test.
It's a grind.
It reminds me of back in the day when you used to just like take photos and then you'd have to get it developed and you got the photos back and you're like, oh, I had my thumb over the
It's before our
lens for
time.
that one.
Yeah.
Is it before, guys don't remember those
Remember when I was born?
99?
Yeah. I mean, I never.
They had those back then.
Yeah, but
They
I
did,
but I didn't live without the internet. I didn't. Like I've taken like film
Right.
cameras out, like film photo cameras out, and
Right,
done
you haven't
really cool
lived
stuff.
without the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a wild thing.
Yeah.
Well, because I guess we were so born in the 80s, you kind of had the weird cross section of growing up your, life when you were a kid without, you still had the phone hung on the wall with a big wire attached to it. And if you ever wanted to get together with someone, you had to call them. And then it was only like when, I was 18 or 19, 20, somewhere around there, that was like everyone had cell phones to like
Huh.
call people, but you couldn't really text.
Yeah.
You could call someone, and then there was like, I don't know, texting was a different plan if you didn't have it on your phone, like your Nokia. And then, I think it was just like everyone started getting, the phones just kept on getting cooler and
Well, so
flippier.
our rule in our house was we couldn't have phones until we turned 13. And at 13, my first phone was an iPhone.
I didn't have a smartphone till college.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, Mom, it's hard to communicate with people with my
Yeah.
Virgin Mobile flip phone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a Motorola Razr. That was a big one back
Iconic.
when I was
Have you seen that new one that just came out?
no.
It's a foldable phone.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say it's like sunglasses you put on. And you're just
No.
like, whatever.
However, Apple sunglasses are coming out in the next few years.
I know.
It's crazy.
Well, it's like kind of one of those things where it's like, is it
Yeah,
going to be
what's
contact
next?
lenses you put in? And it's like,
Yeah,
that's when
probably.
I don't know. I mean, and then you have, you've got, what's his name, Elon Musk,
Elon.
talking about
I knew you were
about
gonna go
the about the brain, the
That
implant,
Neuralink.
the Neuralink.
Yeah, that's what it's called, Neuralink.
Yeah, I heard him talking about
Freaking
that.
nuts on Joe
mean-
Rogan.
I love Elon Musk is kind of one of those guys where I do love what he does because it's just like he
it's
just does
fantastic.
stuff and you're just like, I'm gonna just dig holes underneath LA. Like
I love
I'm
him,
just gonna
dude.
dig a
He
pit.
can, so he does.
And I will, and that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to make a blowtorch and sell it online.
Well,
And
that,
sell
his
out
whole
of them.
thing was he wanted to make like $20 million or something.
Yeah.
So he's like, I'll make a blowtorch.
I'll make a butane or like a
Yeah.
had a little propane canister that you screwed in, and it was a blowtorch, but it was called not a blowtorch,
Or not a flamethrower.
not a flamethrower,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Not a
Even
flamethrower,
though it was fully a flamethrower.
but it was a flamethrower. I mean, like that's
He's the
that's
best.
yeah.
He is.
He's
the
just a
best.
wild mind, and I
sends a
appreciate that.
spaceship to the
why
and
not?
lands
Come
it.
on.
And then lands
Send
it.
it up there.
And then lands it.
We got rockets. Come on.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
I love that guy.
It's pretty crazy. But yes, devolve all of your stuff into 8mm.
And it's super.
You'll enjoy it.
Sell the Super 35 red and buy an 8mm.
You don't need
camera.
a Super 35. You probably do. I don't know, but you will get back a lot more
'Cause
trying to
Instagram
shoot around
needs
with
that
an
red
8mm.
footage.
Yeah, Instagram does. Just so you know.
Crazy.
Anyway, dude, thank you
Cool.
for doing this, man.
Yeah,
This has been
absolutely.
awesome.
Thanks so much.